Chapter 479. In the Darkstar stronghold, Oven lay in the middle of the room with 3 doppelgangers tied together in the corner. There are a total of 5 Oven, 4 doppelgangers and 1 main body, Sherman said with a deep voice. The people of Godora saved 1 doppelganger, so the main body is him. He hid very well, and Sinisa was able to read his mind. Following the doppelganger's thoughts, she searched every inch of the area and found the traitor's main body in a very secretive place. The tall and skinny man called Sinisa nodded. He was also a Grey Bee super in the hunting team, a psychic. His doppelgangers were exactly the same as his main body, and even their mental waves were the same, making it impossible for others to tell them apart. However, this also became a clue for them to track him down. Anner smiled with satisfaction. Very good. Your efficiency has made the organization proud. With this, our operation can end early. Ashes do it. Ashes nodded, and with a lift of his finger, Oven's main body turned into a pile of dust. He died quietly and silently. Everyone was expressionless. They were already used to the feeling of killing enemies for the organization. Just as they were about to pack up and retreat, everyone's movements suddenly froze. Their eyes were filled with shock as they slowly looked toward the corner. They saw that the 3 doppelgangers of Oven were still there, and their faces that were filled with blood had a mocking expression. The main body is dead, but why haven't the doppelgangers disappeared? Anner's expression changed, and he looked at the pile of dust on the ground. Could it be that it's not the main body? Ha! The 3 doppelgangers burst out laughing, and they were out of breath. This laughter made the Darkstar warriors furious. They had worked so hard for so long, but they had been played. Anner's face twitched, and he yelled, "Kill them all! One of them must be the main body!" Schwa, schwa, schwa. The 3 doppelgangers turned into ashes one after another. The first 2 had died, but the other doppelgangers were still fine. When the 3rd Oven died, Darkstar couldn't be sure if the last one was the real body, but they had already expected it. The Oven in Ghidorah's hands is the real body. He is so daring to use his real body as a doppelganger to mislead us and take the risk to accept Nagajan's protection. He tricked us. If I caught him sooner, he'd be dead. Sherman was furious. Bang! The more Sherman thought about it, the angrier he got. He felt that his companions were looking at him with eyes full of blame. In fact, they weren't, so he couldn't help but smash his fist on the chair because he couldn't reach the table. Anner's face was gloomy. If the 4 doppelgangers die at the same time, Oven will also be injured. There's no time to lose. Everyone move out and kill the real body hiding in Nagajan. The 4 doppelgangers had been seen through, so they had locked onto their target. As long as they killed the real Oven, the mission would be completed successfully. Anner didn't want to waste any time. He was prepared to lead everyone and attack with lightning speed to end this mission. After Han Shao received the news, he rushed back to the stronghold with the 2 of them. He saw that everyone had a grim expression on their faces. He walked all the way to the meeting room, where the main combat power was gathered. He saw Oven sitting at the end of the table and was stunned. Didn't they say that the real body had been captured? According to Darkstar's character, they would have killed the real body. However, Oven was still alive, and the mission hadn't failed. In an instant, Han Shao guessed the truth and shook his head helplessly. You should have told us earlier that you were the real body. Sorry, I was afraid that the news would leak out. Only by keeping the information to myself would there be no risk of the enemy knowing about it. Cough, cough. Oven covered his mouth and coughed. Blood spurted out from between his fingers, leaving bright red spots on the table. His eyes were lifeless, and his face was sickly. The senses of the doppelgangers were connected to him. The death of the 4 doppelgangers in a short period of time had dealt a heavy blow to the real body. He was in a very bad state right now. He secretly took a risk and replaced the doppelgangers with his real body to receive the protection of Nagajan and the others. He decided to wait and see. It was because the real body that Darkstar was searching for was actually his doppelgangers that he had the confidence to do so. He didn't like to be passive. Instead of hiding and praying that Darkstar wouldn't find him, he would rather be protected. It would be safer. However, Darkstar has already seen through my little trick. Their next move will definitely be to take the initiative to kill me, Oven said weakly. I can only rely on you guys to protect me. Please. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. This mission was indeed not easy to complete. The official process should be to protect Oven from Darkstar's pursuit and continue to escape. However, it was impossible to fight forever. He guessed that as long as they delayed the enemy and waited for Oven to create another doppelganger, they would be able to confuse the enemy again and delay the arrival of Ghidorah's reinforcements. He had never heard of Oven's name in his previous life. It should be because he had died in the Battle of Norios and was successfully killed by Darkstar. That was indeed the case. Other than Anner and the other ground forces chasing after him, there would definitely be a large number of Darkstar fleets hiding in outer space. To Oven, this was a desperate situation where he could only struggle at death's door. There were fleets lying in ambush in outer space. If he left in a spaceship, he would be surrounded and killed. He had to take advantage of the short moment before Darkstar fleets attacked to escape. It was almost impossible, and the requirements for the spaceship's performance were extremely high. However, there was a spaceship that could accomplish this difficult task. Rista's Blacklight Stealth. It only needed a few microseconds of warm-up to enter hyperdrive. Furthermore, it was equipped with anti-capture and anti-shielding devices. This high-level reconnaissance spaceship produced by the Radiant Federation could pass through most of the danger zones and escape Darkstar's ambush. If I help Oven survive, what will happen in the future? Han Xiao frowned. He suddenly thought of the S-rank mission, Bloodline, on his interface. He had a feeling that Oven could be a helpful factor in this mission. Although he still had a mission completion card in his hands, it would only give him the lowest reward. For such a high-level mission, he naturally had to try his best to raise the rating. It was not easy to accept a high-level mission, and using a mission completion card would be too wasteful. He was prepared to keep this mission completion card as a backup in case he encountered any troublesome missions. Darkstar will not hesitate. They will be here very soon. Han Zhao's tone was stern. He slapped the table and signaled for everyone to quiet down. We don't have much time to prepare. Listen, I have a plan that can directly send Oven out of Norios. Everyone was shocked upon hearing this. We have to split into two groups. Nagajin, I, and the majority of the people will stay behind to delay the pursuers. Orochio will bring Oven to find a teleportation mage and get him to send you guys to the port quickly. Not only will this save time, but it will also shake off the pursuers. After that, you'll go find Rista and bring Oven out of Norios. Han Zhao's face was solemn. The plan sounded simple, but it was extremely risky. Darkstar's pursuers had 2 Calamity-grade supers and ashes, who could cover a large area. It was truly terrifying. The most important thing was that they did not have much time to prepare, so everything could only be carried out in a hurry. Nagajin was the only grade A on their side, and he could attract the firepower and restrain ashes, making him unable to kill anyone else. Fortunately, they had injured Ashes a few days ago, which would more or less affect his combat ability. However, even so, dealing with 2 Calamity-grade supers at the same time was already beyond their limits. Han Xiao knew that even with himself, they would not be able to deal with Anner and Ashes without any preparation. Thus, there was only one choice, which was to split up the battlefield and split up the enemy. Thus, they had to let the enemy know that Oven was escaping. Only then would Darkstar be able to split their forces and deal with them while sending people to chase after Oven. It was equivalent to splitting the risk, but it was still very risky. However, they could only take the risk now. Time was of the essence, and Han Xiao quickly distributed the tasks. Everyone was very nervous and moved as fast as possible. After less than 10 minutes of preparation, a loud sound suddenly sounded. Boom! A strong wind pressure hit the entire building, and everyone was blown away by the shockwave. However, they were already mentally prepared and jumped out, landing on the street and raising circles of dust. In midair, the transformed Anner was looking down at everyone with wind pressure around his body. Ember was also in midair, stepping on a 100-meter-long black tornado of carbon particles. The other Darkstar warriors were closing in from the ground, and they were filled with killing intent. The attack came so quickly. Han Zhao's expression was solemn. Nagajin was beside him, and his body was covered in flames. He had entered battle mode, and the surrounding mercenaries were all on alert. Many of them had nervous expressions on their faces. Not everyone could remain calm in front of an enemy that was far stronger than them. The strong pressure was like the falling of the sky, causing everyone's heart to tighten as if a heavy stone was pressing down on them. The shockwave from the collapse of the building swept up a lot of dust, and the movement was extremely loud. It once again attracted many onlookers to stop and look at them with a pained expression. It can't be again. Chapter 480. The energy fluctuations of the two calamity-grade supers wantonly spread out, and Han Zhao felt a sharp pain in his forehead. His instincts were warning him like crazy, and he felt a strong sense of danger. In the energy detection vision of the mechanical suit's helmet, every cell in Anner and Ash's body was emitting energy arcs like solar prominences, constantly providing them with a huge amount of energy. They were like countless high-energy reactors, absorbing energy from their cells and using it as fuel to activate their Esper abilities. The energy reaction of a grade A super far exceeded that of all the grade BS present. The image formed by the two of them on the energy level spectrometer was like the difference between a burning fire and the flame of a lighter. Only Nagajin could compete with the two of them, and Han Zhao's energy reaction was far from the three calamity-grade supers. This was the difference in their energy levels. The collapse of the building turned the street into a mess, and the shockwave blew past everyone's body. Han Zhao breathed slowly, trying to calm himself down as his brain worked quickly. The situation is very bad now. Darkstar is out in full force. If the two calamity-grade supers decide to work together to get rid of us first, although we'll be able to buy time for Oven, many people will definitely die here. Although I'll be able to escape unscathed, Haluz, Sylvia, and the others will be in great danger. They might die in the hands of Ashes, and the losses will be too great. Oven is already escaping, and Darkstar's main goal is to kill the traitor. Seeing that the traitor is not here, there's more than a 50% chance that they'll split up and chase after him. Oven hasn't gone too far, and the enemy can see that the target is close by. This should make them think that we're afraid of them chasing after Oven. As expected, Enter scanned the area and did not find the traitor. His heart sank, and he looked into the distance. He saw an aircraft that was escaping crazily between the gaps of the building, and the pilot was Oven. I see them. The bone tubes on Anner's back spewed out sharp air currents. Just as he was about to speed up and chase after them, Han Zhao shouted in a voice that everyone could hear, "Stop them!" Bang! Nagakin leaped forward and crashed into Anner's body midway. The wind pressure shield was almost shattered, and the two of them flew out together in midair. Like a speeding arrow, they left a trail of air behind them and pierced through the 4 buildings in front of them. Anner was instantly entangled. On the ground, the mercenaries and Darkstar clashed fiercely. Light flashed continuously, and explosions rang out one after another. The battle had begun. Electric currents flashed all over Han Zhao's body, and the mechanical beasts pounced out. Black Panther type, Ranger type, and Spider type shuttled through the chaotic battlefield to assist the other mercenaries. 178 turrets were deployed, forming a dense net of laser beams. 3 unmanned Amphiptera mechanical suits controlled by Philip joined the battle. In an instant, Hans's firepower, Hancha's Han of him, of his of the supers, of the calamity. Kalala. Countless thick gray alloy plates spread out and were attracted to the various parts of the Void Dragon mechanical suit. Han Zhao's body size rapidly increased, and he turned into a 5 to 6 meter tall medium armor. The armor was extremely thick, and even the weak joints were covered with round, heavy armor. He looked like a heavy infantryman, giving off the feeling that he could move mountains. The halo array and the sonic sphere floated behind the medium armor, forming 2 rings, one large and one small. Assault form, second strengthened version. After obtaining high-end knowledge, Han Xiao had strengthened the energy source of the exoskeleton assault armor, increasing its power and increasing its size. His body was in the center of the assault armor, and he could control this medium exoskeleton armor through his senses. The propellers on his back, calves, and feet worked at the same time, pushing the assault armor into the sky. Han Xiao punched out with both fists, and his steel fists brought with them strong wind pressure. You again. Ash's wound was still hurting. He was furious, and a large black cloud turned into a diamond shield. Dong! The steel fists hit the diamond shield, and the vibrators on his wrists turned the force of the collision into a shockwave that quickly entered the diamond shield. The next moment, Ash's shield cracked and shattered, turning back into particles. Ash's eyes were cold, and he was about to attack with all his might. At this time, Anner, who was fighting with Nagajin, shouted, "They want to stop us from chasing the traitor. The traitor is our target. I'll hold them back. Don't be held back. Quickly chase after them." Hearing this, Ash's expression changed, and he glared at Han Xiao. "You're lucky. I don't have time to play with you. Get out of my way." The mission was more important, so Ash suppressed his killing intent. The black cloud turned into a giant snake and carried him away from the battlefield, chasing after the fleeing oven. The buildings in front of him collapsed one after another. The rumbling continued without end, and smoke and dust billowed. Waves of tremors rose one after another. The aftermath of the battle had already spread out, and the damaged area was constantly expanding. The passers-by and onlookers hurriedly moved away. Recently, there had been many incidents of destruction, and the security team was always on alert. At this time, more than 200 security team aircraft appeared, but they happened to be in the path of Ashes. They were all swallowed by the black cloud and turned into piles of scrap metal in a few seconds. The security personnel inside were all squeezed to death. More than 200 security team combat aircraft were killed instantly. Han Xiao pretended that he could not stop them and shot a dozen small missiles in the direction of Ashes. Looking at Ash's figure that was quickly moving away, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The two Darkstar Calamity Grade Supers were separated, so their risk was much lower. Oven could only rely on himself. With a glance at the ground, the entire street was almost completely in ruins. The terrain was complex, and the mercenaries and Darkstar warriors were fighting fiercely, splitting the area into many small battlefields. In the sky, Anner and Nagajin were having a great time fighting, crashing through buildings one after another. The shockwave created by the collision was the trajectory of the two of them. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. Ashes is chasing after them, but Anner, who is good at speed, is being held back. The situation is not that bad. At least, Oven will not be caught so quickly. Anner might be able to escape, but the other Darkstar warriors will not be able to escape like him. The moment he leaves, Nagajin will be able to kill all these Darkstar warriors, so he will not do that. The only problem is that Anner is very strong, and his ability is very troublesome. He is almost invincible against us. Han Xiao frowned. He knew that Nagajin needed his help. With that in mind, Han Xiao took out his self-made heavy laser rifle and moved toward Anner while shooting. Rumble. The sound of the buildings collapsing behind them was like a death knell. Oven's face was covered in sweat, and he accelerated the aircraft to Mach 1.3, which was far beyond the safety standard of an aircraft. The transparent shield protecting the pilot was trembling nonstop, as though it was going to break at any time. A normal aircraft had a safety valve installed, and its speed was at most 350 kilometers per hour. However, in the short preparation time before the Darkstar attack, Han Xiao took advantage of being a mechanic and removed the safety valve of this aircraft. He then replaced it with a backup engine for the carball, so that Oven could escape with this modified aircraft. Ashes is not slower than me, and he does not need to avoid the buildings. If this continues, he will catch up to me in 15 minutes. Oven gritted his teeth. Do you have any ideas? Aroshia did not reply. Her arm turned into an energy shield to protect the aircraft. She did not care about Oven's life and death. She only wanted to complete Han Zhao's order. Oven continued. Time is too tight. The teleportation Meiju mentioned is in City 8. If we maintain our current speed, we should be able to reach there in 15 minutes, but Ashes will catch up soon. Aroshia turned a deaf ear to him. She was lost in thought. In the distance, Ashes was hot on her heels. Between the complicated buildings, a black snake was rampaging, chasing after the aircraft that kept changing its route. The recent incidents of destruction had attracted the attention of the Norios financial group. The battle this time was even more intense. The management of Norios received the news immediately and held an emergency video conference. Most of the troublemakers are Ghidorah's people. Our system has verified the identity of one of the Grade A supers. He is a senior officer of Ghidorah's War Bureau, Nagajan. His opponent's background is unknown, and he must have used a fake identity when he landed. However, since he is an enemy of Ghidorah, our guess is that he is most likely a member of Dark Star. Other than the two parties, we have also discovered the presence of Black Star. He is also involved and is on Ghidorah's side. The upper echelons of the financial group had a headache. These people were not to be trifled with. They are still fighting, and the area of destruction is still expanding. We have to stop them. I suggest we implement the third emergency plan. Let the guard fleet from outer space enter the atmosphere and intervene in the battle. I object. If the two parties do not compromise, the Grade A supers will attack the fleet, and it will only cause our losses to be greater. I suggest we let the Guardians take action and let their supers handle this matter. Let them help Ghidorah deal with the Grade A supers from Dark Star. We cannot stand on the side of these terrorists. At the same time, I suggest we activate the city's protective shield to reduce the losses. I agree with most of the suggestions, but there is one that needs to be changed. After the Guardians arrive, they cannot intervene in the battle between the two parties. Instead, they can monitor the destruction of their battle. Norios has always been neutral. Whether it is Ghidorah or Dark Star, siding with either side will cause trouble. Let them fight it out themselves. The Guardians can only intervene when the Grade A supers from both sides are about to be killed. Don't let anyone from either organization die in our territory. By the way, we cannot let Black Star die either. I don't want Ames to throw Floating Dragon Island at us. This group of people chose Norios as their battlefield, so we can only consider ourselves unlucky. Losses are inevitable, so let's not create any more trouble. Let's draw a region for them to fight in. Anyway, we have already bought insurance for this planet. I agree. Seconded. The upper echelons nodded. Chapter 481. Tong, tong, tong. Don't dodge if you have the guts. Sherman's expression was ferocious. He held the giant gun with both hands and shot out thick beams of light that pierced through the walls of the building, chasing after Haluz. Cease fire if you have guts. With a roar, Haluz dragged his battleship slicing blade and used the buildings as cover to avoid Sherman's shots. He circled around Sherman in the complicated terrain of the battlefield. After the battle broke out, Sherman immediately found Haluz as his opponent. He still remembered this mercenary who had injured him and was still holding a grudge. The chaotic battle between Dark Star and the mercenaries had formed many small groups that were spread out in this area. Shouts, gunshots, and explosions could be heard from afar. The aftermath of the chaotic battle between the supers had caused the destruction of this area to continue to increase, and flames could be seen everywhere. Haluz was hit by Sherman a few times. This dwarf cannon master's attacks were very powerful, and he did not feel good. His shattering light armor was burnt black all over, so he continued to fight as he moved away from the main battlefield. His opponent was an elite warrior of the Dark Star, who was also Grade B. Haluz had to focus on dealing with him and did not have time to care about anything else. He only remembered that the others had also encountered a strong enemy. Fosthad and Will Sander were fighting fiercely and were also far away from the battlefield. The three Volga brothers worked together and dealt with the Dark Star warriors on the main battlefield. Fu Ding should be hiding with Sylvia, but the battle affected such a large area. Haluz could not help but worry that the two of them would not have anywhere to hide and would be targeted by the enemy. Shio! A laser beam missed his shoulder and hit a building in the distance, causing an explosion. Haluz cursed in his mind, hurriedly focused and dodged again. This time, a hurricane swept over from afar. Haluz could not resist and was thrown dozens of meters away. From the corner of his eyes, he saw a figure a few hundred meters away being blown into the sky as well. It was Sherman, who was also attacked by the hurricane indiscriminately. Looking up, they saw the wind demon Anar flying around in the sky at high speed, dragging a small hurricane that covered an area of 1 square kilometer behind him. Wherever he passed, the buildings and streets would be blown away by the wind pressure, as if they had been plowed. The tall buildings that originally blocked his vision were almost all leveled, and his vision became much wider. He could clearly see Nagajan and Black Star fighting with Anar in the sky. As Anar was too fast, the two of them were in a tough battle. Bang! A wind pressure cannon blasted Black Star far away, crashing into a building with a boom. Haluz gripped his weapon tightly, jumped up, and ran toward Sherman. He wanted to help Han Shao, but he had to finish off his current opponent, Sherman, as soon as possible. My back. Han Shao flew out of the hole in the building and gasped. His armor was covered in damage, and the tactical screen showed the overall battle situation that Philip observed. It was a stalemate, but his attention was mainly on Anar. Looking at Wind Demon, who was freely playing with Nagajan, he felt troubled. This guy is indeed a veteran high-level combatant of Dark Star. His ability is too difficult to deal with. We can't keep up with his speed, so we're in a passive position. Han Zhao's expression was grave. There were dozens of mission objectives in the Grade A mission, Ghidorah's Ally. Most of them were to kill or capture various Dark Star members or battleships, and a certain number of missions had to be completed. Some of the missions with higher rewards were specific people, such as killing the only important member of Dark Star. Anar was one of the mission objectives. The amount of reward represented the difficulty of the mission, and Anar's mission reward was ranked 6th among the dozens of missions in Ghidorah's Ally. Being at the top meant that Anar was strong. Most of my normal combat methods are useless against him. He's very fast and can hide, so it's very difficult for my weapons to hit him. He doesn't even need to come into contact with us. As long as he passes by us, the wind pressure can attack us. Furthermore, he can control the wind pressure to form a shield, so his defense isn't bad. Nagajan's agility in the sky can't be compared to him. No matter how strong his punches and kicks are, it's useless if he can't hit him. Han Shao thought calmly as he fired. Anar's abilities were very comprehensive. Only a few of his abilities could deal with Anar, and the most effective one was naturally Aim's character summon card, which could imprison Anar for more than 10 seconds. It was very effective against this kind of speed-type enemy, but it could only be used once, so it was very precious. Even if he wanted to use it, Han Shao would have to wait for a good opportunity. Perhaps Chun Xing's character summon card could also come in handy? Hui Mao, Yi Xiao tempting the enemy, and so on, while he was observing the other party. Anar was also observing Han Shao. Is he Black Star? Anar's gaze was scrutinizing. This was actually the first time he had seen Han Shao with his own eyes. In the past, he had understood Black Star from the intelligence reports and Ash's narrations. He was still somewhat curious about this guy who had repeatedly made Ashes suffer. He did not understand why Ashes always suffered in the hands of Black Star, as if he was a stumbling block for Ashes. The organization cultivated Ashes in order to let him play a more important role. Ash's ability could accurately, quickly, and kill creatures on a large scale without destroying other objects. This was an important weapon to kill all of Ghidorah's pure-blooded breeds, and the weapon could not be malfunctioned. When Darkstar discovered the talent that Ashes displayed when he was young, they decided to turn him into a strategic killing weapon that belonged to Darkstar. Letting Han Shao live would affect Ash's mentality, and now it had already hindered Darkstar's interests. Coincidentally, Anar felt that it was just right for him to get rid of Black Star so that Ashes would not keep thinking about this mercenary. If that good-for-nothing student of mine can't do it, then let me get rid of you, Anar thought to himself. Rumble, at this moment, the earth suddenly trembled. Within a range of tens of kilometers, a large number of cracks appeared on the ground of the city, exposing the underground mechanical foundations. The buildings that were still intact sank into the ground and were protected. At the edge of this area, 20-meter-tall mechanical pillars extended from the ground, forming a huge circle. These mechanical pillars lit up at the same time, and a huge sky-blue spherical shield quickly formed. Like an inverted bowl, it covered this circular area with a diameter of more than 20 kilometers, isolating everyone fighting inside from the rest of the city. Every city had a large number of devices set up underground. This was an isolation shield. Norios had taken the action of minimizing losses, restricting the battle to this area that was no longer worth saving, preventing the battlefield from moving. This was to protect the rest of the city. This move was equivalent to giving up this area, but compared to a city that was thousands of square kilometers in size, this was a sacrifice to save the king. If it was an ordinary troublemaker, they would definitely be arrested, but a fight between Calamity-grade supers was not so easy to stop. Norios only had one Grade A Guardian, and he was hired with an astronomical salary. One person alone might not be able to stop this battle. Forcefully interfering would only increase their losses, and this group of people had a strong background. Help Godora? Although Norios was not afraid of Darkstar, they were businessmen and did not want to be targeted by such a terrorist organization. Help Darkstar? Only a fool would do such a thing. Therefore, the upper echelons of the financial group were also helpless. They were not the government, but the managers of this planet. Their only goal was profit. If the cost of maintaining law and order was too high, they could consider watching from the sidelines. It had been many years since Grade A supers fought in Norios. The commotion caused by Darkstar was the biggest one in more than a decade. The upper echelons of the financial group felt that in such a situation, staying out of it would be safer. Chapter 482. All the passers-by within the protective barrier were sent out to watch the battle from the outside. It was not a big deal to watch a good show. Oven and Ashes, one chasing the other, had already left the area and were not locked up by the protective shield. More security teams were waiting outside the shield, and there were at least 1,000 spacecrafts. The Guardians hired by the financial groups had already entered the shield and stood at the edge of the battlefield, monitoring the situation. They had no intention of interfering for the time being. Seeing this scene, the faces of Darkstar and the mercenaries changed slightly. They felt as if they were locked in a cage. The area is locked down? Looks like the situation is too bad. Anna's heart sank. After causing such a big commotion, Norios could not stay for long. After Oven died, they would have to evacuate. Darkstar's fleet was already on standby in outer space, ready to receive them at any time. They would probably clash with Norio's space defense fleet, but there was nothing to be afraid of. Anna still remembered Ash's embarrassing battle a few days ago. If I stay here to delay the enemy, it might be beneficial for the overall situation. Ashes has already failed once, and he might not be able to deal with the siege of Nagajan and Black Star. He can't take on such a heavy responsibility. After the battle is over, it will be easier for me to evacuate than him. My speed will make me invincible. On the other side, the appearance of the protective shield made Han Xiaoxin's head shake. He had a bad feeling. The area lockdown seemed to limit Anna's range of activity, but it was actually an extremely disadvantageous factor. It meant that Anna did not have any scruples. In the sealed area, Anna could use his ability without any scruples, turning the air in the area into a vortex that could destroy everything. Moreover, the protective shield separated the passers-by. Han Xiao originally wanted to use Anna's destructive power. Dragging some passers-by into this matter was no longer feasible. Boom! Han Xiao was hit in the chest by the wind pressure cannon. The armor caved in, and he was sent flying again. His face was ugly. The situation is really bad. I wonder how my officers are doing. Far away from the center of the battlefield, Fu Ding and Sylvia were retreating into the distance. They were originally hiding nearby, but as the battlefield expanded, they had no choice but to move away to avoid being targeted by the enemy. Let go of me. I want to go back and help. Sylvia's tone was anxious, and her face was red from exerting too much force. She wanted to shake off Fu Ding's hand. Fu Ding held Sylvia's wrist tightly and pulled her forward. He sighed and said, "Stop fooling around. You can't help. Any enemy can easily kill you. Didn't you see the battle in the sky? As long as you get sucked into that hurricane, you're dead meat." Sylvia was speechless. She said angrily, "But you can help. I don't want to get involved in your mercenary group's mission. This has nothing to do with me." Fu Ding shook his head. Sylvia was furious. She bit Fu Ding's hand and wanted him to let go. Fu Ding felt a slight pain. He lowered his head and looked at the back of his hand that was bleeding. He sighed helplessly and said, "No matter what you say, I can't watch you die without doing anything." At this moment, footsteps sounded in front of them. A Dark Star member blocked their path. Two lost fishes that slipped through the net. Sinisa sneered. She had just killed a grade B mercenary nearby and had sensed the commotion. Thus, she had blocked their path. Fu Ding and Sylvia's expressions changed. Sylvia hurriedly pulled out her alloy sword. Her hands were trembling slightly. She wanted to control her hand, but Sinisa's grade B pressure made her, who is only a grade D super, instinctively feel fear. Her body was unable to calm down. At this moment, Fu Ding pushed Sylvia behind him. "Quickly run. I'll stop her." Fu Ding's tone was calm. "Who?" An invisible force rushed toward the two of them, interrupting Sylvia's words before she could say anything. Fu Ding opened his mouth, and singing came out of his mouth. He formed an invisible barrier with his psychic energy to protect the two of them. However, the next moment, it shattered, and the two of them were sent flying. Only a grade C? Sinisa was a little disappointed. She thought that she had caught a big fish, but it turned out that they were just two small shrimps. Sylvia's but hurt from the fall, but she realized that she was not injured at all. That attack was just a probe. Although Fu Ding's psychic energy shield had shattered, it had still blocked a lot of the power. Furthermore, most of the damage had been taken by Fu Ding. Standing up, Fu Ding felt that his nose was warm. He wiped it, and his hand was covered in blood. He felt as though his brain was being pricked by needles. He endured the pain and tried his best to maintain a calm expression. He turned to look at Sylvia, forced a smile, and said, "I'm fine. Don't stay here. Otherwise, I'll have to take care of you." Sylvia heard this and gritted her teeth. She grabbed her alloy sword and turned around to escape. She was very decisive. She knew that she was not strong enough, and she would only cause more trouble if she stayed. Fu Ding turned around to face the enemy. He adjusted his clothes, took a deep breath, and silently activated his psychic energy. "You're not going to escape?" Sinisa was interested. "We're both psychics. There's no harm in having a little spar." Fu Ding forced a smile. Sinisa opened her eyes wide and said in astonishment, "You, a grade C psychic, want to have a spar with me? Frankly speaking, this is the first time I'm using psychic energy to fight. I don't like fighting. If you can let me go, I'll be very grateful." Fu Ding's tone was serious. Sinisa did not know whether to laugh or cry. She was too lazy to talk nonsense. She directly released her psychic energy, preparing to get rid of this guy blocking her path before chasing after the little girl who was running away. Anyway, it would not take much time. Bang, bang, bang. The air between the two of them distorted, and a series of shock waves burst out. The formless psychic energy crazily clashed. Pooh! In just a few seconds, Fu Ding seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. His head was raised high, and blood spurted out from his 7 orifices. He rolled and fell to the ground, not moving anymore. "You overestimate yourself." Sinisa clicked her tongue and walked past Fu Ding's body. Just as she was about to chase after Sylvia, Fu Ding's weak voice sounded from behind her. "Cough, cough. Fighting is really difficult. I'm really not used to such crude behavior." Fu Ding stood up shakily. His face was covered in blood. Blood flowed down his elegant chin and dripped down. Sinisa turned around and frowned. She was rather surprised. Her psychic energy had completely suppressed him. Logically speaking, she should have turned his brain into a pile of mush. Forget it. It would be the same even if she made up for it. Phaidon coughed out a mouthful of blood and said softly with a bitter smile, "I shouldn't have tried to be brave. I'm not cut out for this. Yes, I'm trash, okay? Stop scolding me. My head hurts enough. I know you're in pain too. Be good. Stop arguing. I promise you, okay? Just don't let my body die. It's yours. Sigh. I'm really unwilling. Who are you talking to? Sinisa was confused. She turned around and saw that there was no one else beside her. She immediately understood. This person had been beaten to the point that his mind was in a mess. You're unlucky to have met me. Sinisa released her psychic energy once again. She did not need to hesitate when killing her enemies. Boom! The next moment, Sinisa felt a loud sound in her ears that echoed like a bell. Her brain felt as though it had been struck by a hammer, and Phaidon did not move at all. Instead, she was the one who was sent flying. With a bang, Sinisa fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. She was stunned for a moment before regaining her senses. She looked at Fu Ding in shock. What was going on? Fu Ding seemed to have changed into another person. His temperament was completely different. His movements were gentle, and he slowly wiped away the blood on his face. He was like a woman, but his gaze was hysterical, with a hint of joy from finally escaping. Why do I feel that I'm lucky to have met you? I was just worried that I wouldn't be able to find a target to vent my anger on. Fu Ding. No. Chun Xing's body was surrounded by psychic energy that was dozens of times stronger than before. Sand and pebbles flew in all directions. Seeing this, Sinisa's expression changed drastically. You like fighting, right? I'll play with you. Chapter 483. Huff, huff. Sylvia ran through the ruins, panting. She dodged the enemies everywhere. This level of battle was still too early for her. There was almost nothing she could do. Fu Ding was stalling for time. She didn't dare to waste the opportunity created by Fu Ding. After running for a long time, her lungs were burning. Sylvia stopped and held her knees as she panted. Rumble. Suddenly, an earth-shattering gust of wind blew over, and the wind pressure from Anna grew stronger and stronger. Sylvia had a look of fear on her face. With such a large area, there was no way she could escape. She stood there in a daze and looked up, watching as the gust of wind rapidly approached. At this moment, Amphiptera Mecha rushed out. The chest armor split open and swallowed Sylvia whole. The next moment, the storm swept past. This mecha was sent flying along with countless bricks and steel. It fell hundreds of meters away. Sylvia hid inside the mecha. She was only dizzy from the impact, but was fine. She had escaped death. She shouted in surprise, "Philip, Master asked me to protect you and hide." He said the storm is expanding. She instinctively looked up at the sky. Using the vision of the mecha, she saw that a tornado had formed in the sky inside the protective shield. Countless things were being sucked into this whirlpool and spun in the sky. The tornado was still expanding. Through the flying debris, she could see Anna flying in a clockwise direction. He was like a flash of light, stirring the air like a turbine. The protective shield was only so big. Anna let go of his hands and prepared to create a tornado large enough to fill up the inside of the protective shield. He could attack indiscriminately. In a sealed area, his storm could reach the level of destruction faster. In the sky, Anna was too fast. Han Xiao and Nagajan couldn't touch him at all. He was flying in circles at his own speed. The two of them couldn't do anything about it. If we let him continue like this, when the storm is fully formed, everything inside the shield will be crushed. Even his subordinates won't be spared. Does he want to abandon his subordinates? Nagajan's tone was heavy. He was experienced and could already see the result. They couldn't keep up with the other party's speed and couldn't stop Anna at all. If the Norios Guardians watching from afar could help, they might be able to stop Anna, but the Guardians didn't seem to want to help. The two sides, fighting on the ground, simultaneously moved away from the center, but there were still quite a few people who were swept up, crushed into bloody bits by the devastating wind pressure. Quite a few of Han Zhao's machines were also caught in the storm. The mechanical beasts struggled futilely in the storm, and the bases of the turrets that were inserted into the ground were uprooted, tossing and turning in the violent winds. Looking from the outside of the protective shield, an iron-gray vortex made of countless debris was rapidly expanding. The inner circle of the protective shield was occasionally scraped by the rotating debris, and electric sparks kept bursting out. It was like a washing machine. This scene was as if the world was spinning. In the storm, Han Zhao's armor had long been shattered, and the Void Dragon mechanical suit was also covered in wounds. He only managed to stabilize himself after pouring all his energy into the mechanical wings and thrusters. Seeing that the situation was not good, he knew that if he didn't stop Anner, everyone else would be finished. A Grade A super at full power was too strong. Han Xiao had even used Life Return once. He could not help but be even more certain of one thing. Luckily, he had used the mission completion card to advance his promotion. Otherwise, he would have definitely been defeated. He yearned for such strength. Han Xiao was currently level 116, and he still had more than 200 million experience left on his interface. If not for the fact that he had already advanced, he would probably have to use Life Return once or twice more in this battle. Currently, most of his current methods would not be effective. After all, Dark Star was attacking, and he did not have much time to prepare. Furthermore, after his promotion, Han Xiao did not have much free time to build new machines. Luckily, I made a copy of Aim's character summon card. Otherwise, I would have to run. Now, I have a trump card that can turn the situation around. Han Xiaoxi made up his mind and said loudly to Nagajin in the communication channel, "What's your strongest attack?" "What do you mean?" Nagajin was confused. "I have a way to make Anner stop. It should be able to restrict him for about 10 seconds. During that time, he won't be able to move or use his abilities. This is the only chance to heavily injure him," Han Xiao said with a deep voice. The situation was changing rapidly, and it was very disadvantageous. However, he still maintained his calm. Although he had explosive means, a Grade A super had extremely high resistance. Even if Anner was not known for his defense, just his own attack alone would not be enough to destroy the enemy's combat ability. He had already tested it on Ashes once. Only the Grade A Naga Muscle Bully Kim could deal fatal damage to him. Only then would he not waste this precious Dragon Emperor character summon card. 10 seconds? Can you really control Anner? Nagajin could not believe it and thought that he had heard wrongly. 10 seconds was not something that could be described as an opportunity for people of their level. It was the difference between life and death. This Black Star was only a Grade B, so how could he possibly restrict a Calamity grade for 10 seconds? "Just believe in me." Han Zhao's tone was deep. Anner was an Esper, and his main attribute was speed. No matter what, his strength could not possibly exceed 1,800 points. Okay. Nagajin took a deep breath. Black Star was able to defeat Ashes, and he had never disappointed him before. Maybe he really could do it. He decided to believe in him this time and immediately started to gather energy. All the cells in his body released a powerful pugilist flame. It was like a golden flame that could not be extinguished by the wind. Instead, it became stronger and stronger, and his aura continued to rise. He did not even need 10 seconds. In fact, he only needed to stop Anner for 1 second, and that would be enough for him. His strongest attack was a storm of attacks, and he was only worried that he would not be able to hit the enemy. Han Xiao focused his vision and stared at Wind Demon, who was moving at high speed in the wind. He pointed his hand at Wind Demon from afar with a sharp gaze. Success or failure depended on this. What is he trying to do? Anner also noticed Han Zhao's actions. He could still see all the details clearly in the storm. He did not understand Han Zhao's actions, but the fact that Han Xiao was able to survive until now in the area where the storm was the strongest surprised Anner. Compared to the standards of a Grade B super, Han Zhao's vitality was a little too strong. However, he should be reaching his limit soon. Anner turned around and looked at the edge of the battlefield. The Guardian had started to move, moving toward Black Star. It seemed that it also felt that Black Star was in danger and wanted to take him away. Anner immediately understood the Norios Financial Group's intention. "You want to save Black Star from my hands? You don't want to anger Ames, right? If you wish." Anner sneered and controlled a gust of wind to attack the Guardian that was rushing over, slowing down the Guardian's footsteps. Then, he charged forward with a terrifying wind pressure cannon that was powerful enough to blast a crater out of the ground, attacking Han Xiao. Anner was determined to get rid of him here. *T. The Guardian was shocked. The upper echelons had asked him to intervene in an emergency to prevent the high-level combatants of both sides from being killed. He originally wanted to take Black Star away from the battlefield first, but he did not expect Anner to attack him. He was going to kill Black Star, even at the risk of angering the Guardian. At this moment, a terrifying energy wave suddenly erupted from Han Zhao's body, causing everyone's face to change color. It was as if the space had frozen. The shadow of a woman appeared behind Han Xiao and extended her hand toward the approaching Anner. That's Dragon Emperor Ames. Nagakin, Anner, and the Guardian all had looks of shock on their faces. Chapter 484. The next moment, a terrifying pressure that shook the minds of the three Calamity Grade supers suddenly descended, heading straight for Anner. What? Anner's expression changed drastically. Boom! Anner, who was flying at high speed, suddenly stopped. Without any warning, the air around him suddenly froze. He was like a bug trapped in amber, unable to move. You have used character summon card. Ames. Anner is now in the freeze state. Duration, 14 seconds. How is this possible? This unexpected turn of events caused Anner to turn pale with fright. Could this terrifying, sealing power be the Dragon Emperor's power? It was true that Black Star was an officer of the Dragon Emperor, but why was he able to use the Dragon Emperor's power? It had been a long time since Anner had felt panic. At this moment, his calmness was completely destroyed. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move an inch. He couldn't even speak. Looking at Nagakin, who was riding on flames, his eyes finally showed fear. Bang! The heavy punch that was like a golden thunderbolt landed on Anner's face, and the weak wind pressure shield shattered like paper. The muffled sound of the punch hitting the body was like muffled thunder, and a golden impact ring burst out from the place where the punch landed. This punch had been accumulating power for a long time, and its power was enough to shake mountains and destroy cities. It was enough to shatter an entire street block. However, Anner was firmly fixed in midair, and he couldn't fly out. All the power of the punch was trapped in his body. A mouthful of smelly blood sprayed into the wind. Bang, 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 bang. Nagakin roared, as if he was venting all of his frustrations. His powerful punches and kicks created countless afterimages, and every single one of his attacks landed squarely on Anner. Anner was like an immovable target, unable to move at all. He had to endure the torrential attacks, and his body was constantly changing shape. Too savage. Han Zhao's eyelids twitched as he watched, and he almost wanted to dub Nagakin with the words "Oh la 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 la. This was a rare opportunity, and the higher the damage, the better. The two of them sandwiched Anner in the middle, and all the attacks were directed at him. Without the wind pressure shield, Anner could only take the attacks with his body, and his bones were crushed. Broken bones pierced through his skin, and blood spurted out like a fountain. The Guardian did not have time to be shocked. His mission was to prevent the deaths of the experts on both sides, and Anner was also one of his targets. Just now, he did not feel that Anner needed help, but the situation suddenly changed. The Guardian quickly changed his target this time to Anner. However, the wind pressure cannon that Anner released before he was hit happened to obstruct the Guardian's footsteps, and he couldn't provide timely assistance. After 14 seconds of berserk attacks, when the time limit was over, countless amounts of energy burst out from Anner's body. Boom! A bloody firework exploded in midair. Metahumans who could not use their abilities had a very weak body. For example, a metahuman with a shield could block a nuclear explosion with a shield, but it did not mean that he could block it with his body. Anner's strength was not defense, and without his speed, Han Xiao and Nagakin dealt tons of damage, and the speed at which his HP decreased could be said to be thousands of miles. Nagakin's ferocious combo attacks were unleashed to the fullest, and he felt very satisfied. Previously, when he was ganged up on by Anna and Ember, he had suffered quite a few injuries. Now, he had finally gotten his revenge. Usually, in a battle of the same level, after getting close, the opponent would immediately pull away. It was not like just now, where he could beat the target to his heart's content. Even if it was an ordinary person, if they did not dodge or block, they would be beaten up by another person for 14 seconds. If the attacker wanted to kill, this amount of time was enough to kill someone. However, Anna was still alive. Boom! The broken body of the wind demon fell to the ground and turned back to human form. It was bruised and covered in blood. There were deep wounds everywhere, and it was like a broken bag with blood flowing out. Anna spat out large mouthfuls of blood and was on the verge of death. He could not even stand up. He stared at Han Shao with eyes filled with shock, anger, and disbelief. I can't believe I died here. Nagajin clenched his fists, and his heart was full of excitement. Blackstar did not go back on his words. His trust was worth it. Han Shao heaved a sigh of relief. He was also almost completely exhausted. Thankfully, this trump card of his had succeeded. However, he did not expect to use the Ames character summon card so soon after obtaining it. He had to kill Anna to recoup his cost, and he still needed to deal the finishing blow. Thus, he extended his hand to stop Nagakin. He had to do the last hit himself so that he could get the experience to kill the enemy. Anna turned his head with difficulty to look at the approaching guardian. This was his last hope. However, the guardian suddenly slowed down, pretending that he could not catch up. Han Shao did not hesitate. He raised the high-frequency strike cannon, faced Anna's angry eyes, and stabbed it into his chest. Poochie! The blade pierced through the back, but not much blood flowed out. Anna's blood was almost all gone. Anna's body trembled, and his hand grabbed the blade. His eyes slowly became lifeless, and he looked at the sky in a daze. His lips trembled, and he said the last sentence with difficulty. His voice was so soft that no one could hear it. Dark Star, immortal. The next second, the hand that grabbed the blade lost its strength and slid to the ground. His life had left this body. Han Shao breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, a notification appeared on the interface. You have killed Anna, LV 173. You have received 24.7 million EXP, killing a target more than 10 levels above you. Bonus 280% EXP. Personal damage, 13%. You have received an additional 8.9 million EXP. The damage output was very low, but Han Shao was not surprised. Nagajin was the source of the fatal damage. To be exact, Nagajin had killed Anna and reaped the benefits. Of course, without his character summon card, Nagajin would not have been able to kill Anna. Killing Anna gave him more than 33 million EXP. This was the biggest one-time reward so far, and it could be considered as replenishing his EXP pool. Wind Demon, Anna, has been completed. You have received 18.2 million EXP, plus 1,200 Godora Civilization favorability. Character summon card, Anna. Godora Civilization, friendly, 2/340/3000. The raging storm slowly dissipated, and the pungent smell of gunpowder filled the air. Looking at Anna's corpse, everyone, be it friend or foe, froze with their mouths agape. They had never thought that this Calamity-grade super would actually die here. Even Anna himself did not expect this. A Calamity-grade super has died in battle. Darkstar is probably going crazy. Because of a traitor, they lost 2 high-level combatants. They've suffered a huge loss. I'm afraid that'll truly enter their sights, which will be more dangerous than before. Han Shao sighed. Killing Anna would probably result in negative repercussions for him. However, it had already been a life-and-death situation. Since things had already reached this stage, Han Shao would not be soft-hearted and let the dying Anna go just because he was worried. There was less than a year to version 2.0, and he had already planned to begin his preparations after this operation. As for his attention toward Darkstar, to be honest, Han Shao was not too worried. After all, once version 2.0 Zero arrived, he would have to solve the mutation disaster. At that time, there would be an even greater conflict with Darkstar. Darkstar would always be an enemy that he had to deal with in the main storyline of version 2. Zero. It was only a matter of time. Han Xiao looked around. With Anner's death, the morale of the Darkstar warriors had instantly collapsed. However, this sealed protective shield did not allow the enemy to retreat. Chapter 485. At the same time, hundreds of kilometers away, Ashes was still chasing after Oven. After chasing for more than 10 minutes, both parties were already far away from the battlefield where Han Xiao and the others were, and were about to reach the location of the teleportation mage. After Anner's death, the situation on the battlefield had been reversed. The Darkstar warriors had become the prey, and no one had the time to send a message. Thus, Ashes had no idea about the sudden situation on the battlefield. In his impression, Anner was definitely still playing with those mercenaries who were in the way. He was not worried about Anner's safety at all. When he first joined Darkstar as a child, Anner was already a high-level Calamity grade combatant in the organization. He had been taught by Anner since he was young, so he was very clear about how strong his teacher Anner was. Since Anner had taken the initiative to stay behind and delay, he definitely had absolute confidence. Although his teacher seemed to be a little disappointed in him recently, these were all details that did not need to be bothered. Ashes was full of confidence in Anner. With Nagajan's speed, he would not even be able to touch the corner of his teacher's clothes. How could he lose? Even if he really could not win, with his teacher's speed, he would be able to escape as he wished. Now that there was no news, did it not mean that everything was under control and there was no need to inform him? That was what Ashes thought. In order to not attract attention, Ashes dispersed the huge black cloud of carbon particles and only let the particles surround him. Oven was still flying in the aircraft, and the two of them maintained a distance. Oven looked back frequently, and sweat appeared on his forehead. We're almost there. When we stop, we only have about 10 seconds to move, and then he will catch up. If we can't complete the teleportation in 10 seconds, we're dead. Aroshia tilted her head, thought for a moment, and corrected him. Not us. Only you will die. Thank you for the reminder. Oven gritted his teeth. How infuriating. The teleportation mage's shop was in sight, and Aroshia suddenly remembered. Right? He was beaten up last time, so he might have moved away. Oven bang. The aircraft slammed on the brakes and crashed into the wall of the bookstore, creating a large hole. The bookshelves that were in the way were all smashed into pieces, and the shredded papers were like exploding fireworks, floating in the air. The two of them jumped down halfway and landed in the messy bookstore. Time was of the essence, so there was no time to park the aircraft and knock on the door. The counter at the door was also sent flying. Ixin was sitting on a chair with a book in his hands, staring blankly at the scene in front of him. He still hadn't come back to his senses. His face had an expression of, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? My shop collapsed as soon as I opened my eyes. Aroshia pointed at Ixin. It's him. That's great, he's still here. Oven heaved a sigh of relief. He looked up at the big hole and said awkwardly, at least it's quite airy. Ixin opened his mouth and looked at Aroshia. I know you. You're with the mercenaries who beat me up last time. I need your help. Please send us to the northern spaceport quickly. Money is not a problem. Oven didn't dare to delay and said directly. Ixin was stunned. He looked down at the shredded papers on the ground and finally reacted. His whole body shook, and the book in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. It was as if a dagger had stabbed into his heart. He was in so much pain that he couldn't breathe. This is my life's collection. Oven was anxious. Why would he care about these broken books at a time like this? He quickly said, we're being chased by someone who kills without blinking. He belongs to Darkstar. If you don't take us away, he'll kill you too. I'm from Godora. I'll pay you a high service fee and compensate you for all your losses. There's no time. Hurry up and cast the spell. Looking at the sky through the hole, Ash's figure was rapidly approaching. He would enter his attack range in 2 seconds. At that time, he would be able to kill Oven with a snap of his fingers. Oven broke out in cold sweat. He looked nervously at the hesitant teleportation mage. They hadn't discussed this before, so he didn't know if the mage in front of him would help. This was their only hope of escaping. At this time, Orochius said, "My friend said that if you don't help, he'll come and find you again." Hearing this, Isshin didn't say anything and directly opened the portal. The whirlpool-like blue light filled the surroundings with the radiance of magic. Oven was overjoyed and rushed in. Isshin didn't dare to delay either. He didn't want to stay and use the mage's delicate body to face the fury of the pursuer. With a flash of light, the portal closed and the three of them disappeared without a trace. Ashes rushed in and saw this scene. His expression suddenly changed. His face was full of dark clouds, and he was furious. He actually lost them again. He thought that Oven was at his wit's end. He didn't know that there was a teleportation mage hidden in the city. If it weren't for Aesop, the Han technician wouldn't have known that there was a hidden teleportation mage, and this tactic wouldn't have been able to be carried out. Now, this information played a crucial role. At that time, Han Xiao also didn't expect to be involved in a Dark Star trader's pursuit. Ashes looked at the empty room and couldn't help but clench his fists. Only a mage who was also proficient in teleportation could track the traitor. At this time, the traitor had escaped to another place and lost the trail. He couldn't chase after him. He wondered if he was having bad luck recently. How could he always encounter unexpected situations? He even failed a mission that was almost guaranteed to succeed. Teacher Anner was probably going to die of anger. Ashes sighed and took out the communicator to contact Anner. The operation had failed. He had to send the information back as soon as possible. Everything had to be planned. Buzz the communicator flashed, and Anner's face appeared on the screen. He frowned and said, "Did you succeed?" Ashes shook his head and explained the situation. "You're really useless." Anner was furious. Ash's body stiffened. He was a little embarrassed. This was the first time he was scolded. It seemed like his teacher was really angry. "What do you think the traitor escaped to?" "I don't know. There are no clues," Ashes replied. "If they escaped on a spaceship, it would save us a lot of trouble," Anner said. Ashes nodded. Darkstar's fleet was already on high alert around Norios, ready to intercept at any time. As long as the traitor tried to escape on a spaceship, he would be surrounded by the fleet. "How's the situation on your side?" Ashes asked. The situation is in a stalemate. Come back quickly. I've stalled the enemy. As long as you can arrive in time, we can work together to get rid of Ghidorah and Black Star's mercenaries. If we can't catch the traitor, we'll get rid of this group of enemies first." "Okay." Ash's eyes lit up. He turned back and headed in the direction he came from, rushing to meet up with Anner. When he thought about getting rid of Black Star, his gloomy mood brightened up. The protective shield was still performing its duties, isolating this area. However, the situation had become one-sided. Darkstar soldiers were continuously defeated, falling one after another. In the middle of the ruins, Anner ended his communication with Ashes and turned off the communicator. He tapped his cheek, and a matrix-like circuit flashed across his face. His appearance quickly changed, revealing Han Zhao's face. After taking off his face simulator, Han Xiao rubbed his face and looked at Nagajin. "I've lured him back, and I have good news. Oven has successfully escaped." Nagajin laughed heartily with a satisfied expression. He cracked his knuckles and said, "Beautiful. My fist is not full yet." Han Xiao nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. Acting was very tiring. After Anner died in battle, he picked up the communicator and instantly thought of a use for it. Darkstar only had one Calamity Grade Super left, Ashes. The balance of power was finally tipped. Although Ames's character summon card had been used, Nagajin was also very strong. With him, they might be able to turn the tables and surround Ashes. The only problem was whether Ashes knew what was going on. If he knew, he would definitely retreat. Coincidentally, Ash's call request came through the communicator. Han Xiao immediately took out his face simulator, scanned Anner's corpse, and disguised himself as him. He used his tone to test Ashes. While acting, Han Xiao was sweating profusely. After all, he did not know what Anner's usual tone was like. Thus, he He carefully observed Ash's reaction and came to the conclusion that Ashes respected Anna very much. Ashes did not doubt Han Zhao's words and did not notice the small differences. Thinking about it, this was normal. Only when Anna died would others be able to obtain his communicator. In Ash's eyes, this was impossible, so he was kept in the dark. Not only that, his reaction allowed me to confirm one thing. There is indeed a Dark Star fleet waiting in ambush outside the atmosphere. Han Xiao took out his communicator, tried to contact Erosia, and said to Nagajin, "I didn't expect to be able to kill a calamity-grade enemy. This way, we have more room to maneuver. The pursuit team is almost completely wiped out, so we don't have to take the risk of sending Oven away." Nagajin thought about it and felt that it made sense, so he nodded in agreement. A rigid plan was ultimately not as good as improvisation. This time, the guardian who was waiting at the side walked up, looked down at Anna's corpse, and sighed heavily with a face of regret. "You guys actually killed him. Sigh, if not for his attack, I wouldn't have been one step slower." The two of them immediately looked at each other. "This person is extremely vengeful." "Wonderful, wonderful." The guardian pretended to be regretful for a while before turning to look at the two of them. His gaze was focused on Han Xiao, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable surprise. After pausing for a while, he did not say anything and slowly retreated. The people from Dark Star were already dead, so he had no intention of interfering. Seeing that Anna was on the verge of death, if he were to interfere now, Ghidorah would think that he was deliberately obstructing him. Thus, he changed his mind and gave up on the rescue. It was so King difficult to stay neutral. Nagajin retracted his gaze, looked at Han Xiao, and asked hesitantly, "Your ability just now seems to be related to the Dragon Emperor?" This question had always been in his heart, and he only had the chance to ask now. He knew that his feeling was not wrong. The power just now was definitely at the level of a beyond grade A. Why was Black Star able to use the ability of the Dragon Emperor? What was their relationship? If this information was sent back to the War Bureau, the Intelligence Department would probably have to re-evaluate Black Star's position on Floating Dragon. "Nothing, I just did some small work." Han Xiao waved his hands with a humble expression. Nagajin's gaze became even more serious. A few days ago, he felt that the chances of this mission were very slim. Even with the help of Han Xiao, his pessimism had not been reduced by much. However, the effect that Han Xiao had played was far beyond his imagination. If not for Anna's corpse lying beside him, he would never have believed that he would be able to kill one of the calamity-grade supers while being attacked by two of them at the same time. 2 against 1, and he had been killed instead. The sounds of battle around them gradually became sparse, which meant that there were fewer and fewer Dark Star warriors. The environment was a mess. Han Xiao said with a deep voice, "Let's stop chatting. The battle is not over yet. The people from Dark Star are still alive. Get rid of them quickly before Ashes returns. Don't leave a single one behind." Swoosh! The battleship's slicing blades sliced open Sherman's flesh and cut him into two. Toulouse took a deep breath and put away his weapon. After fighting for a long time, he finally killed this dwarf cannon master. After the enemy's morale collapsed, so did their courage. Toulouse killed the enemy in one go. Just as he was about to leave, his footsteps suddenly stopped. He turned around and walked to Sherman's corpse. He picked up the huge gun that had fallen and weighed it in his hands. Black Star should like this kind of spoils of war. Carrying the huge gun on his shoulder, Toulouse left the scene. Bang! Sinisa's brain exploded into a pile of minced meat. She fell to the ground, and her body was still twitching instinctively. Chun Xing rubbed her throat that was hoarse from singing loudly, closed her eyes, and healed the damage to her mind. The enemy was not weak either, and she had exhausted a lot of energy. "Fu Ding, I saved your life. Your body will be my reward," Chun Xing said with a snort. Fu Ding in her mind smiled helplessly and did not reply. Chun Xing looked up at the protective shield. Her eyes flashed, and she mumbled to herself, "I can't get out now. I can only pretend that Fu Ding is in contact with those mercenaries. As long as I'm not seen through, I can escape when I can move freely." She wanted to hide the fact that the controller of her body had changed. It was not difficult to pretend to be Fu Ding. Her senses were connected to Fu Ding's, and she knew Fu Ding's habits like the back of her hand. It was enough for her to be 100% similar. Thinking of Han Xiao, the culprit, Chun Xing's mood worsened. However, as long as she could fool this guy, she would be free. Chapter 486. Now that Nagajin was free, it did not take long for him to finish off all the remaining Darkstar warriors. The protective shield was a fighting arena, and there was no way out. The surviving mercenaries dragged their injured bodies and gathered at the center of the battlefield. Han Xiao counted the number of people. There were originally more than 100 mercenaries, but now there were less than 30 left. He glanced at Haluz, Sylvia, the Volga brothers, and Fu Ding and heaved a sigh of relief. The survival of his officers was confirmed. The Mech Legion was scattered in different locations, and he ordered the other mercenaries to collect all the machines. This immediately caused many mercenaries to complain. The wind was so loud just now. God knows where your machines flew, too. We just finished fighting. Don't be so overboard. However, despite their complaints, the mercenaries still obediently did as they were told. Although not everyone saw how Han Xiao performed when he used the Ames character summon card, the mercenaries who saw this had even more respect in their eyes. Han Xiao picked his ears and was rather annoyed. These lousy mercenaries complaining about just picking up things. The players are still the ones who are dedicated. As long as there is a reward, no matter how tiring it is, they can enjoy it. They're so much better than these mercenaries. I miss them so much. Haluz walked forward and handed over Sherman's huge gun. Spoils of war, this is for you. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. He grabbed the gun, glanced at it, and took off the outer shell. He observed the internal structure and nodded. This gun is not bad. The item introduction popped up on the interface. It was called Tricore Photon Cannon. This was a weapon that enjoyed the Cannon Master mastery, which meant that the Cannon Master would receive additional bonuses when using it. The blueprint was rare, so it saved him the effort of gambling for blueprints. Han Xiao happened to need a non-ordinary light energy gun. Although he was not a Cannon Master, the mechanical force bonuses could be used. It was just that the bonuses were not as great as a Cannon Master's. Launcher Masters were long-range damage dealers. Launcher Masters were very popular in dungeons. They were the main tank, archer, and controller of the traditional Iron Triangle battle formation. Han Xiao had also played as a launcher in his previous life. Other than firing cannons, it was all about firing cannons. The damage output was in the hundreds, but it was too monotonous. Although firing cannons was fun, it was easy to get bored of it. Among the three classes of mechanic, he still preferred the more flexible mechanic. Putting away the gun, Han Xiao looked at Sylvia. There were no injuries, but the lingering fear had not disappeared. He turned to look at Fu Ding, but found that Fu Ding was covered in blood. It seemed that he had experienced a fierce battle. Are you okay? Han Xiao asked. Chun Xing immediately became nervous. Recalling Fu Ding's usual demeanor, he hurriedly pulled out a kind smile and deliberately said in a gentle tone, I'm fine. It's just that I met an enemy, Sylvia interrupted and said, by the way, I saw you get knocked down with my own eyes. That enemy was much stronger than you. I was worried about you the whole way. Luckily, you're fine. How did you beat him? Chun Xing's smile suddenly froze. He wanted to sew Sylvia's mouth shut. Of all times to ask, why did she have to ask at this moment? She was trying to get him killed. She coughed and said, I didn't beat him. The enemy was a grade B super. I was almost killed by him. You also know that I'm not very good at fighting. Luckily, a storm suddenly blew over and blew us away, saving my life. You're so lucky. Sylvia sighed. No one doubted her. When it came to luck, they had always felt inferior. Yeah, you're so lucky. Han Xiao sighed and slapped her heavily on the back, causing her to cough violently. -1 foot damage popped up on top of her head. Chun Xing's back was in pain. Suppressing her anger, she forced out a smile and laughed dryly. Seeing that Han Xiao did not suspect anything, she was relieved. She finally managed to fool Black Star. Han Xiao snapped his fingers and called Nagajin over. At the same time, he held Chen Xing's shoulders tightly, making it impossible for her to escape. Chen Xing twisted her body uncomfortably and said, "Can you let go of me? Stop pretending." Han Xiao rolled his eyes. "You can't fool me." Chen Xing immediately broke out in cold sweat. She hurriedly tried to find a loophole, but she could not figure out which part had gone wrong. She clearly did not give herself away. "You're mistaken. I'm Fu Ding." She forced a smile and explained. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and leaned close to Chen Xing's ear. "I told you, if you really escaped, you wouldn't want to meet me." Chen Xing's heart skipped a beat. This time, Nagajin walked over. Han Xiao patted Chen Xing's shoulder and said with a smile, "Stop struggling. There's a grade A super here. You can't escape. You don't want to be beaten up by him." Chen Xing gritted his teeth and stopped pretending. He angrily said, "How did you recognize me?" Han Xiao also had a helpless expression. The interface had already revealed her identity. He could not be fooled even if he wanted to. He could not play along and pretend that he did not see anything. He was also very desperate. Chen Xing was at her wit's end. She could not think of any way to escape. She glared at Han Xiao fiercely. In her mind, she had already imagined 100 ways for Han Xiao to die. She wished she could whip his corpse 100 times herself. She might as well give up the control of her body. It was better than being suppressed by someone else. Fu Ding's consciousness returned. He moved his limbs, shook his head, and smiled. "I knew you would recognize me. You're really lucky." Even though she regained control of her body, she still did not crush your consciousness. Han Xiao was quite envious. The luck glow was still very strong. Fu Ding laughed. "Actually, it was quite pleasant communicating with her. I know everything about her, and she knows everything about me. We understand each other's thoughts. Congratulations on finding your soulmate. Why don't you just marry her? My mission will be completed." Han Xiao shook his head. Suddenly, he was stunned. Wait, could it be that I guessed right? Fu Ding's mission was the perfect completion condition. Could it be that he really became a victim? Fu Ding pointed to his head and said helplessly, "I won't tell you how she scolded you." Han Xiao laughed dryly, let go of his hand, and hurriedly moved away from Fu Ding. He grabbed Sylvia's hair and wiped his hands. He suddenly did not want to get close to Fu Ding. After casually chatting for a while, he looked at the time. Asha should be back soon. At this time, Han Xiao discovered a serious problem. Although the battle was over, the protective shield still isolated the area. If they could not leave, they could not besiege Ashes according to the plan. This problem could only be solved by the Norios Consortium. The Guardian had been watching not far away. Han Xiao felt that it was necessary to communicate with him. Han Xiao and Nagajin teamed up and asked the Guardian to open the protective shield. The Guardian did not even think about it and directly rejected the request. "There is still a Dark Star member alive. He is rushing back. If you don't open the protective shield, we can't deal with him," Nagajin said. The Guardian was expressionless. "I know. That's why I will not open the protective shield before the enemy you mentioned leaves. You will stay here until I confirm that this matter is completely over." "Are you trying to protect the Dark Star members?" Nagajin said angrily. "My duty is to protect Norios. Do you want me to open the protective shield and let you continue to destroy the city? I don't want to see anyone causing trouble in Norios. After this matter is over, our consortium will ask God Aura for compensation." The Guardian narrowed his eyes. Not saving Anna was because he had no choice but to give up. However, that did not mean that he would stand on Ghidorah's side. The protective shield would definitely not be opened, and that was the bottom line of the financial group's upper echelons. Furthermore, the financial group did not wish to see any more high-level combatants of Darkstar dying here. There is another one at the end. P.S. Follow the official WeChat account. Limiox is 666. Chapter 487. The Norios Financial Group did not want to provoke either party, but they would not completely accommodate either party's demands. This move might cause them to have a conflict with Ghidorah, but it would not be that serious. This was a matter of degree, and a small conflict was within the acceptable range. They were very flexible in handling matters. The financial group was also prepared to ask God Aura for compensation. The first reason was that an important member of Darkstar had died, and God Aura had taken advantage of it. It would be easier for them to compromise on other issues. The most important reason was that Darkstar would not compensate, and God Aura was a lawful civilization and a lawful regime. They could be understood as good people in a broad sense, and good people would abide by the rules. Nagajan still wanted to persuade them, but Han Shao reached out to stop him, and he stopped talking. Han Shao could already see that the financial group would not give in on this point, so he could only give up on the plan to attack Ashes. He felt that it was a pity that his previous disguise had lost its effect. However, the situation was constantly changing, and he was already used to this feeling. Not many things could develop according to the most ideal situation. Since the fight is not going to happen, this mission is more or less over. I won't be chased anymore, Han Shao thought to himself. Looking up at the sky, a black cloud stopped in the sky, revealing Ash's figure. He had finally rushed back. Ashes looked down at the devastated battlefield through the protective shield, and his face was filled with shock. Suddenly, he noticed Anner's corpse, and he could not move his eyes away. The shock on his face turned into horror. Perhaps luring Ember back isn't completely useless. Letting him see Anner's corpse with his own eyes will shock him and leave a psychological shadow in his heart. A few minutes ago, Ashes remembered Anner's instructions and quickly rushed to the battlefield. He could not wait to participate in the battle to make up for his failure in the mission. With Minter's speed, no enemy can escape from him. Blackstar will also not be able to escape like before. This time, I can finally get rid of him completely. This thought flashed through Ash's mind. He couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and pleasure. With a speed of 700 miles per hour, his mood was carefree. However, the scene that unfolded in front of him was completely different from what he had expected. What was even more unexpected was that his instructor, who should never have been defeated, had not only lost, but had even died in battle. The moment he saw Anner's corpse, Ashes was stunned. A chill rushed from his spine to his brain, turning into disbelief and fear. Anner, how could he have been killed? Ashes immediately took out his communicator and dialed Anner's number. Beep, beep, beep. However, the few seconds of waiting felt like an eternity. After the call was connected, an image popped up on the screen. However, it was not the Anner that he had been expecting. It was Han Zhao's face, and he let out a deafening laugh. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Ashes was shocked. How could it be you? Oh, you don't like handsome men? Han Zhao chuckled. He pressed his cheeks and turned into Anner's appearance. He then threw a flying kiss. How about this one? Crack. Cracks appeared on the screen. Ashes almost crushed his communicator. He was shocked and angry at the same time. His last glimmer of hope had also disappeared. Anner was really dead. All kinds of emotions surged in his heart. Disbelief, anger, panic, confusion. His remaining rationality reminded him of his current situation. If the other party could kill Anner, he would also be in danger. I'm the only one left. I can't stay and fight anymore. I can't be annihilated here. Ashes gritted his teeth. He stepped on the black cloud and fled as fast as lightning. The situation here had to be reported. As he fled, he contacted the higher-ups of Darkstar and reported the news of Anner's death. This news immediately caused an explosive sensation within the higher-ups of Darkstar. The higher-ups of Darkstar were prepared to hear the news of the completion of the mission, but what they heard was bad news. No one had expected that Anner would actually die in this mission that they were confident of succeeding. When they assigned the mission to 2 Calamity-grade supers, all the higher-ups felt that they would definitely succeed. This news completely messed up their plans. All along, the strength of Darkstar had been constantly changing. At their peak, they had 8 Calamity-grade supers with varying levels of strength. Anner was one of them and was one of the elders in the organization. However, after all these years of fighting, there were many casualties and only 2 of the 8 remained. Anner was one of them. Other than these 2 elders, the rest of the Grade A combatants were all newbies that had been nurtured by Darkstar. Losing a senior figure was an extremely heavy blow to Darkstar. Furthermore, The speed at which the high-level combatants were replenished could not keep up with the speed of loss. The number of Calamity-grade supers in the organization was already extremely low. In less than a minute, the higher-ups of Dark Star issued an emergency order to Ashes. Give up this mission and leave Norios immediately. The fleet will pick you up. We have already lost an important member. We cannot lose another one. Originally, he was the one who was chasing, but now his role had been reversed. Ashes was extremely unwilling, but the situation was beyond his control, so he could only endure it. He turned off the communicator and fled as fast as he could. He did not dare delay at all. He was worried that the enemy would catch up to him at any moment. In reality, Han Xiao and the others could not leave the protective shield. The people of Norios could not wait for Ashes to leave as soon as possible. Ashes did not know that no one was chasing after him. They were all waiting for him to leave. He was just scaring himself. An hour later, the protective shield disappeared, and the metal pillars were retracted into the ground. Norios was no longer quarantined. This also meant that the financial group had confirmed that the battle was over. They had monitored the appearance of the Dark Star fleet, picked up Ashes, and left. This made the financial group heave a sigh of relief. Although there were thousands of battleships outside Norios' atmosphere, it was naturally best if there was no conflict. The pursuing forces retreated, and Han Xiaoxi knew that Nagajan's mission was considered complete. He only needed to wait for Ghidorah's reinforcements to arrive to settle the score. Killing one Anner was already a huge gain for him. The battle had ended, but the effects had only just begun to spread. The death of a Grade A member Dark Star was something that Ghidorah would pay close attention to. In fact, the entire Shattered Star Ring would pay close attention to this news. While countless people were dying every moment, everyone was different. The death of a Calamity-grade super with a sensitive identity was naturally more eye-catching than the deaths of millions of ordinary people on countless planets. Furthermore, he had used AIM's ability, so she would probably be very curious about it. However, this was not the main issue now. Dealing with the Norios financial group was the main issue now. After Han Xiao and the others escaped, they were immediately asked to meet with the upper echelons of the financial group. The financial group was prepared to settle the score, mainly because of the issue of compensation. They wanted an explanation. Introduction: Wang Daliang is a fourth-year student who is about to graduate. His favorite hobby is to play all kinds of games. But when he was about to leave the campus, on a hot summer night when he was bitten by mosquitoes, he suddenly discovered a big secret of his roommate and friend. Chapter 488. The Protector brought the group to another city in an aircraft. In the middle of the city was a skyscraper. Even in the city filled with skyscrapers, it still stood out like a crane among chickens. It was like a middle finger pointing to the earth. On the top floor, there was a helipad protected by transparent cover. The cover slowly opened, and the aircraft landed there. There were many guards standing beside the helipad that led to the interior of the building. Han Xiao and the others followed the Protector through the passage and entered the interior of the top floor. The interior was exquisitely decorated like a mansion. A man sat on the sofa with his back facing the group. Only the back of his head could be seen. On the wall facing him, there were many virtual screens. They were all surveillance images of the battlefield. Look at what you've done on my planet. The man pressed some button, and the sofa automatically turned around, facing the group. Only then did they see the man's appearance. He had a very strong aura, and Han Xiao felt that he looked familiar. He suddenly remembered that he had seen a picture of this person before. A few days ago, he had still been playing a game of cat and mouse with Aesop. Aesop had made a request to steal some accessory. At that time, he had asked Philip to search online. That accessory had been bought by the head of the Norios financial group, for who knew how many wives. This man in front of him was the head of the financial group. What was his name again? Rockfess. I'm the owner of this planet. The man's tone was calm. I know who you are. Ghidorah War Bureau Nagajan, Floating Dragon Guard Captain Will Sander, and Floating Dragon Field Team Commander Blackstar. Because they belong to Floating Dragon in name, The Black Star mercenary was recognized as a unit under Floating Dragon. Han Xiao did not care much about this. Ever since he had joined Floating Dragon, this identity had always been beneficial. It allowed his mercenary group to be temporarily tied to a super faction, which was very beneficial to the growth of his mercenary group's reputation. I have a general understanding of what happened. I have no interest in interfering in the battle between Ghidorah and Dark Star, but your actions have caused damage to my planet. Ghidorah has no law enforcement authority in my territory, so I need you to give me an explanation and ask for legal compensation. My people are calculating the losses, and we will talk in detail when the exact amount is confirmed. Rockfest did not give the two of them a chance to speak. He was resolute and unquestionable. I will report this to the headquarters. Ghidorah will compensate you for your losses. Black Star is just a mercenary that I hired. Their actions were my request. His compensation will be borne by Ghidorah. Ghidorah never mistreats its friends. Nagakin said. After killing Enter, he was in a good mood. This result would also make the War Bureau very happy. For an official of his rank, it was unavoidable for him to cause trouble outside, and the War Bureau would clean up after him. Thus, he did not intend to avoid paying the compensation in the first place. As Rockfest had a very deep network and had a good relationship with many political figures in the Shattered Star Ring, Ghidorah was not willing to offend such a huge capitalist. Don't worry, I never intended to ask him for money. Rockfest looked at Han Xiao and smiled. His tone became much warmer and less aggressive. Send my regards to Ames. He doesn't want me to compensate? Han Xiao immediately had a good impression of him. You know Ames? Ha 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 ha. Who in the Shattered Star Ring doesn't know the Dragon Emperor? Rockfest laughed. I have a business relationship with Floating Dragon. We are on the same side. I heard that Aesop came to steal something from me, but you caught him. Haha, well done. Han Xiao came to a realization. It turned out that Aesop and Rockfest knew each other. No wonder there was such a prank. However, he did not feel that it was strange. Aesop had lived for so many years and was a legendary figure himself. His connections were extremely deep, and he had friends all over the world. Furthermore, with Aesop's ability, the people he knew were most likely people with power and influence, forming a huge network. Now that Ames had brought Aesop back, the Floating Dragon Island faction would benefit from this, and their influence in the dark would most likely multiply. In truth, Rockfest's friendliness was not entirely because of Aesop. He had always provided Floating Dragon with funds and rarely asked for anything in return. It was equivalent to sponsoring. Rockfest was not the only financial group that did this. There were at least 20 financial groups sponsoring Ames. Back then, when Ames was building Floating Dragon, she had released an announcement that she needed money, and countless financial groups had rushed to send her money. Even today, many financial groups still maintain their sponsoring relationships. Otherwise, with Floating Dragon's terrible operating conditions, they would not be able to afford such high repair, fuel, maintenance, and so on. The 4 Beyond Grade A Supers in the Shattered Star Ring all had many financial groups behind them. There would always be financial groups willing to invest in powerful individuals or organizations. Thus, many of them did not have to worry about money, even if it did not work. Many of the financial groups had already gone past the stage of accumulating wealth. Unless they turned money into influence, relationships, or actual items, money was just a string of numbers. Investing in organizations, experts, and politicians was the path for these capitalists. For example, Ames was not the one asking for money, but the other party taking the initiative to give her money. Whether she accepted it or not depended on her mood. As long as one became stronger, many problems would be easily solved. However, at the same time, the problems involved in one's words and actions would become more and more complicated. In the later versions, some large guilds would have the qualifications to cooperate with financial groups and receive funding and loans. The players' influence in the galaxy would continue to deepen, and the way they interacted with each other would become more and more varied. Their influence on the structure of the region would be very dynamic, and the players would always be passionate. I knew about you the moment you arrived in Norios. Now that I've finally met you, you're even stronger than the rumors say. Rockfest took the initiative to extend his hand, and Han Xiao shook his hand. He smiled and did not say anything, but a thought appeared in his mind. The preparation plan for version 2.0 required funds. In order to accommodate thousands of players, the hardware of the mercenary group would have to be upgraded, and all of this would require money. If he could find a financial backer like Ames, he might have more funds. Because Han Xiao was used to being alone in his previous life, he only had some understanding of the cooperation between the guilds and the NPC factions. He had never tried it himself, and all the funds in the plan had to be earned by himself. However, at this moment, he had a new idea. The influence of a faction might be more useful than he had thought. All along, Han Zhao's core business had been to earn money from the players to support himself and his faction. However, he could think a new way of thinking. While harvesting the wallets of the players, he could make the NPCs take the initiative to fork out money. With a flash of inspiration, a new idea appeared in his mind, and Han Xiao immediately became excited. This idea could not be implemented now, but when version 2.0 started, he might be able to greatly increase the benefits that the players brought him. Of course, the prerequisite was that everything developed according to plan. Your Excellency Rockfest, I actually have a favor to ask of you. I hope that we can arrange another time to discuss it in detail, Han Xiao said. Rockfest nodded and said, "All right, I'll give you my private number. After this matter is settled, we can discuss it in detail." After reaching a consensus, the compensation would be borne by Ghidorah alone. Rockfest arranged for an absolutely safe stronghold for everyone to stay in before Ghidorah's reinforcements arrived. Aroshia brought Oven along to meet up with the rest. Oven had escaped death and heaved a sigh of relief. As for the teleportation mage, he left after receiving his reward. He did not want to have anything to do with this bunch of jinxes. Over the next few days, the impact of this incident began to spread rapidly. All sorts of galactic news reported about this incident, and the headlines were more shocking than the previous. Through these media outlets, the news of Ghidorah and Darkstar battle and a calamity-grade super dies quickly spread like wildfire. The truth of the matter was not revealed, and the news only reported a portion of the process and results. However, it still caused a huge commotion. In the infamous list of evil organizations in the Shattered Star Ring, Darkstar was not the strongest organization, but it was the most radical one. Who knew how many civilizations in the Garden Star system had been destroyed by them, causing countless citizens to lose their homes, dragging down Ghidorah. However, there were very few news of direct conflicts. This time, a powerful Darkstar member had died in battle in front of everyone, and everyone was overjoyed. As the news spread, Han Zhao's reputation interface continuously showed that his fame had increased. Just like the previous time, the increase covered all sorts of star clusters. In most areas, his fame had reached small fame, and in the Garden Star system, which he was often active in, his fame had reached famous. In the eyes of most galactic residents, Aim's strength was the only reason Floating Dragon was maintained. However, most of the officers under her had limited fame, and they did not have any activities in the outside world. In this aspect, she was far inferior to the other three Beyond Grade A bosses. The other three Beyond Grade A bosses had elite soldiers and powerful generals, and they had countless experts under them. Ames, on the other hand, was like a commander without an army. Even without a leader, the other three Beyond Grade A organizations in the Shattered Star Ring were still powerful organizations that dominated an area. Floating Dragon was far inferior to them. In the previous incident where Ames smashed the Darkstar mothership, the public's focus was more on Ames' strong performance and the fact that Blackstar was a new member of Floating Dragon. However, this time, the news was created by Blackstar, and the strength he displayed was even stronger than before. Many galactic residents and organizations who were paying attention to this matter had the same thought. Ames is starting to have officers who can take charge of things on their own. Oh my god, this is not easy. Ghidorah understood more details, and Nagajan reported the specific situation. The intelligence department of the War Bureau immediately increased the importance of Han Xiao. including the previous incident where he had captured the Dark Star mothership. This was already the second time that Black Star had attacked Dark Star. It could be said that he was on the side of Ghidorah. Furthermore, he had even helped Nagajin kill Anner, which was a great help to them. After this battle, Nagajin placed a lot of importance on Han Shao. In the past few days, Han Shao had been trying to get closer to Nagajin. This was also the reason why he had accepted this mission. Getting to know Nagajin meant that he had obtained a channel to directly contact the upper echelons of Ghidorah. After waiting for a few days, Ghidorah's fleet arrived in Norios, and this incident finally came to an end. Nagajin brought Oven to the dock, where Ghidorah's huge fleet was docked. Before leaving, Oven took the initiative to shake hands with Han Shao and said, "You saved my life, and I owe you a favor. If you need my help one day, I will do my best." Nagajin nodded at Han Shao and said, "It was a very pleasant experience to work with you. The War Bureau will pay the reward for this time. I hope that we will have a chance to work together again in the future." Han Shao smiled and said, "Don't worry, we will meet again very soon." Nagakin was stunned for a moment. He thought that Han Shao was just being polite and did not say anything. He boarded the ship with Alvin, and the fleet quickly turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the universe. Nagajin's request has been completed. You have received 5,800,000 experience, 24,000 Anas, plus 850 Ghidorah faction relationship. Ghidorah civilization, respect 3, 190/6000, plus 30 Nagajin favorability, plus 30 Oven favorability. One operation gave me close to 2,000 faction favorability. My relationship with Ghidorah has risen to respect. This is not bad. Closing the notification on the interface, Han Shao stopped smiling. Originally, Nagajin would have been crippled and Oven would not have survived. However, the fate of these two had been changed by him, and Dark Star would pay more attention to him. He did not know how they would react. "Where are we going now?" Haluz asked, and all the officers looked at Han Shao. Han Shao stroked his chin. Before the version update, he had set 2 goals. One was promotion, and now that the promotion was completed, he finally had some free time. It was time to start on the second goal, which was to prepare for version 2.0. This was a huge project. Chapter 489. Then, Floating Dragon Island's Black Star. What exactly do you need from me? Once again, Han Shao came to Rockfest Mansion. This time, he met with Rockfest alone. The two of them sat opposite each other, and the servants served tea and drinks. After chatting for a while, Rockfest went straight to the point. "My time is precious. If you have any requests, feel free to tell me." Han Shao put down his cup, leaned forward, and said, "Then I'll be direct. My mercenary group is Floating Dragon's field team, and it has been operating for a year and a half. It's time to expand and increase the scale. I bear the name of Ames on my shoulders, and I can't continue doing small things. Large armies like Sky Ring and Blades are the direction that Black Star is building toward. The stronger the field team is, the stronger Floating Dragon will be. Thus, I need some financial support to build a base that belongs solely to my mercenary group, not a temporary stronghold that I rented." The core of his version 2.0 preparation plan was to expand his faction and then guide the Blue Star players to join his mercenary group during the mutation disaster. Ghidorah and Dark Star were both competitors, and the players only needed to choose between the two factions. However, Han Shao wanted to be a third party and provide a new path for the players. Thus, other than the original righteous and evil, there was also the neutral that he represented. Because of this, problems arose one after another. In order to accommodate thousands of players, the hardware of his faction had to be greatly upgraded. Otherwise, he would not be able to accept and attract more members. The most important factor in attracting players was benefits. Even if Pork Bun's show had nurtured a large number of people who yearned to join his mercenary group, it would not last long. Thus, providing the players with mission resources was the key. Han Shao had long planned for this. When he first established his mercenary group, he wanted to be the middleman for mission distribution, connecting the employers and players. He wanted to use the boundless mission resources in the mercenary world to nurture his faction, retain the players, and build up the reputation of his mercenary group. Other than the characteristics of a mercenary group itself, he also had plans for the NPC resource lands. There were countless ways to give benefits. Apart from the quest resources, another important factor was the faction specialties. Apart from the fact that he was a money-sucking job class, knowledge, and skills, mechanical creations were naturally his specialty. However, it was impossible for him to complete a large number of orders by himself. Thus, he had to consider the problem of mass production. He had to start assembling an assembly line and build his own military factory. With his current knowledge of manufacturing standards, it was just barely possible for him to create an assembly line. This led to the second question: where should the assembly line be located? If a mercenary group were to accept so many players, they would need to have a large, fixed, and exclusive stronghold, which was equivalent to a faction's main city. Otherwise, it would not be beneficial for them to develop a sense of belonging. Only when they had their own main city would they be like a proper army. Even professional guerrilla fighters would still pay attention to a village surrounding a city. The stronghold's location, security, resources, functions, and so on were all problems. Thus, the third problem was naturally raised, which was transportation. Since the number of members under his command had increased tremendously, traveling would be a problem. It would not be good for the players to continuously order spaceships, and it would not be beneficial for maintaining the popularity of the main city. He had to have a faction's own spaceship or reach a long-term cooperation agreement with some galactic travel agencies. These were only the basic problems, and there were many more miscellaneous problems, such as finding a stable supplier of raw materials, contacting a construction team, and so on. Expanding the faction was like expanding the scale of a company. In order to increase the scope of the business, a lot of preparations had to be made, and everything required money. Including the reward from Nagajan, Han Xiao still had more than 500,000 anas left in his bank account. He had counted with his fingers a few days ago, and felt that this amount of money was not enough. Thus, meeting Rockfest at this time was to solicit investment. Expanding the size of the field team, Rockfest narrowed his eyes. Is this Ames' idea? Ames has never been in charge of anything, and you should know that. I am the person in charge of the field team, and this is a plan that I am currently preparing, Han Xiao said. I could tell that it wasn't her idea. Rockfest changed his posture, appearing more imposing. With a smile that wasn't a smile, he asked, "Then how much do you want? How much are you willing to give?" Han Xiao threw the question back. Rockfest immediately changed the topic. So far, I have provided 9 funds to Floating Dragon, totaling around 24 million anas. This will not be the final number, and I still have the intention of investing in Floating Dragon. Jenny and I are old acquaintances, and the returns she gives me are the reason why I am determined to invest. Enjoying Ames' reputation has allowed me to earn a satisfying profit from other channels. Following which, he shut his mouth and looked at Han Xiao with a smile. What he was trying to say was, what can you give me in return? Through investing in Floating Dragon, he had obtained some sort of permission from Jenny to share a portion of Ames' influence. Then, he would use this opportunity to start business negotiations or political activities. This was equivalent to using an investment to exchange for the influence of an expert, and then using that influence to generate money. Over time, he would only earn more than what he invested. Thus, the question was, why should he invest in Floating Dragon's field team? Furthermore, this was only Han Xiao's personal plan. If it was Ames' idea, he would give the money. Black Star did not have that much influence. Want to repay? Han Xiao smiled and suddenly said, I believe that you have intelligence on me. Then, you must know that I have some undying warriors under me. Rockfest nodded and said, I also notice that they are not with you right now. They are natural mercenaries, and their numbers are far beyond your imagination. I know all of them, and expanding the scale is naturally not just about the infrastructure, but also the number of members. I do not need to hire other mercenaries from the free market. They are the targets that I have my eyes on. If you invest, I can quickly expand the scale and become a large mercenary group. At that time, I will give you a satisfactory return. Even if you have Ginny's permission, sometimes you will need floating dragons combat troops to appear personally to help you convince your competitors, right? Or a large mercenary group that is willing to accept your free employment. Han Xiao chose to reveal a portion of the situation. To convince investors, he had to describe the prospects of the project. Although there was a stock market in the galaxy, a mercenary group was far from reaching the threshold. Naturally, they did not have the qualifications to gain something without risking anything. Furthermore, he was not afraid of revealing the existence of the players. The players would enter the galaxy sooner or later, and by then, everyone would know. During the version update period, even if he told Rockfest some information, the other party would not be able to do anything. After all, not even a strand of hair of the players could be found. This was a new idea that he had recently thought of, to let the NPCs recognize the potential of the players and attract them to take the initiative to invest. This meeting was a small test, and he was testing the feasibility of this idea. Rockfest was skeptical and fell in a deep thought. Han Zhao's suggestion had piqued his interest. Helping Floating Dragon build a field team might be a good project, but while Black Star was also a member of Floating Dragon, he did not trust him enough to invest in him. Han Xiao had thought that he would have to wait for a while, but in less than 10 seconds, Rockfest had already made a decision. The head of this financial group was extremely decisive. I won't give you any funding. That's a pity. You missed out on a project that has far greater returns than the investment. Han Xiao shook his head. This time, Rockfest changed the topic. However, I can give you a loan for 1 million anas for 3 years. On account of Floating Dragon, I will give you a simple interest rate. If you repay the loan within a year, I will not charge you any interest. If you repay the loan within 2 years, I will charge you 10% interest, which is 400,000 anas. If you repay the loan within 2 years, 20% interest, which is 800,000 anas. If you repay the loan within 3 years, 40% interest, which is 1,600,000 anas. These are my conditions. Han Zhao's mouth twitched. This interest rate was a little too high. If it was within a year, it would be fine, but if it was more than 3 years, it would be equivalent to a loan shark. Rockfest was only willing to lend him money because he had Floating Dragon's background as a guarantee. Being rich was truly, all right, I'll agree. Han Xiao nodded. He was not worried about returning the loan. Version 2.0 would be released within a year, and as long as the players returned, they would probably be able to count the money until their brains cramped. Not to mention returning the loan. Even if he bought the Norio's financial group, he would still, cough cough, he was too excited. This was still not something he could afford. Rockfest took out his communicator and opened a loan document. Both parties signed it. This document had a legal effect, and it was backed up in the files of many civilizations that they were familiar with. It was protected by the laws of those civilizations. In Han Zhao's previous life, some player guilds had been greedy and refused to return the loan. As a result, their relationship with those civilizations had plummeted, and the upper limit of faction favorability had been reduced to 2,999 points. This meant that they would never be able to reach respected status, and their personal trust level would decrease. If a guild wanted to obtain a loan, they would have to put in a lot of effort to increase their faction favorability. If they did not return the loan, all of their accumulated relationships would be ruined. As long as a guild had foresight, they would not do something so short-sighted as to break the contract. Han Xiao did not have any thoughts of breaking the contract. Ding! Han Xiao received a transfer to his account. Looking at it, the amount had changed to 4,581,010. Rockfest gave the money without hesitation. For a tycoon who could spend over 7 million to buy expensive accessories, this small investment was nothing to him. However, to Han Xiao, this was a huge sum of starting capital. Then, I look forward to working with you. Standing up, Han Xiao shook hands with Rockfest before being led out of the mansion by the butler. He returned directly to the hotel where Haluz and the others were staying. After supervising Sylvia's homework for a while, he returned to his room to think about it. I really got the investment. Looks like the faction's influence is greater than I thought. Now that I have the starting capital, I just need to choose a good place to start building the headquarters. What planet would be good? It has to be not far from Blue Star, but it has to be close to the galaxy. Beep, beep, beep. Just as he was thinking, his communicator rang. It was a call from head supervisor Jenny. Her expression was unfriendly, and the first thing she said after picking up the call was a question. Rockfest told me that you privately applied for a loan from him. Why didn't you inform me beforehand? Jenny, would you agree? Don't call me Jenny. You should call me head supervisor. Of course, I wouldn't agree. Jenny's tone was firm. She had always insisted on being content with her own territory. Building a field team was an unnecessary expense to her. Ames had never needed a strong armed force. Then, why should I tell you? Han Xiao shrugged. He understood Jenny. Jenny was in charge of finance and business, and she had a strong desire for control. She would not agree to the expansion of the field team. Although they were both officers of the same faction, there was a conflict between their ideals and business. Of course, the core conflict was that Jenny did not trust him enough. After all, he was a mercenary who had only joined Floating Dragon halfway. Chapter 490. Jenny's attitude was very forceful and aggressive, as though she would not let him off easily if he did not listen to her. However, Han Technician did not fall for this. He would not return the money. He briefly explained the benefits of doing this to Floating Dragon. As for whether Jenny would accept it or not, he did not care and directly hung up the communication. This action made Jenny extremely angry. She had a strong desire for control, and Han Zhao's actions did not go through her permission. This made her feel that her position as the head supervisor was being challenged, and she even started to doubt Han Zhao's loyalty. Ames was a boss who did not do anything, and all of Floating Dragon's matters were left to her to manage. Therefore, she was responsible for most of the consequences of Floating Dragon's decisions. She had a lot of power, and Ames trusted Jenny. All of the members of Floating Dragon would listen to Jenny's management. Black Star had joined Floating Dragon for more than a year, and he had always kept a low profile. However, when he suddenly made such a move, Jenny's sensitive nerves were immediately provoked, and she became vigilant. She did not trust all of the other officers because she was the only one who was related to Ames. Subconsciously, she was the only one who was related to Ames. The others were all outsiders. Han Xiao hung up the communication, and Jenny did not hesitate to turn around and report to Ames. She explained the situation in detail and expressed her opinion. She felt that Han Zhao's field team was too free and needed to be restricted. It would be best to transfer him back to Floating Dragon's headquarters and remove the field team. She felt that since Floating Dragon was neutral, having the Dragon Emperor as a symbol was enough. There was no need to form an armed force that operated outside. Under normal circumstances, Ames would not reject her suggestion. But this time, Ames rejected her. You're too nervous. It's just some money, so there's no need to make a fuss. I trust Black Star. He's a reliable person, and I gave him the authority to move freely. As long as he doesn't become a wanted criminal, you don't have to inform me. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. Bakatcha. Ames hung up the call, leaving behind a stunned Jenny. She held the communicator in her hand and was at a loss. She didn't expect Ames to reject her so straightforwardly. This had never happened before. Because Han Xiao caught Aesop, Ames's trust in him skyrocketed. Although it was not as good as Jenny, who had been with him for many years, it was far beyond the scope of ordinary subordinates. Without Ames's approval, Jenny found that she couldn't do anything to Han Xiao. She was instantly flustered and exasperated, and the veins on her forehead throbbed. She took a deep breath, took off her glasses, closed her eyes, and rubbed the bridge of her nose with her fingers. She slowly calmed down, and when she opened her eyes again, they were full of seriousness. Ames's rejection made Jenny feel that her position was threatened, and a sense of urgency surged into her heart. Han Xiao naturally didn't know that this small conflict had caused Jenny to mistakenly think that Han Xiao wanted to compete with her. However, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. After weighing the pros and cons, the startup funds for Plan 2.0 were naturally more important. The version update was less than a year away, and this period of time was used to build the mercenary group's base. The location of the base was very important, and Han Shao wouldn't choose a barren planet. He had to set up camp on a prosperous planet so that he could share the NPC resources of the planet and use the geographical location to make up for the lack of NPCs in the base. After searching through the star map of the Garden Star system for half a day, he finally chose a planet in Ghidorah's territory called Planet Golden Gate. It was very close to Uberly Hub and could quickly reach the star zone where Blue Star was located. This meant that transportation was convenient, and the planet itself was prosperous enough. From the perspective of the players, this planet had all the necessary functions: shops, entertainment, missions. The reason he chose this planet was because he had a good impression of Ghidorah's faction, and it would be easier to do things. There were also discounts. Secondly, it would reduce the cost of setting up weapons. Ghidorah's territory had a powerful fleet, and Darkstar would not cause trouble there. After killing Anner not long ago, Han Shao decided to prioritize safety. Furthermore, this was Ghidorah's territory, and he could filter out players who joined Darkstar. With the example of the Germinal organization, Han Shao did not want a bunch of spies to appear in his base. Among all the planets to be chosen, Planet Golden Gate was one of the top choices. After choosing his target, Han Shao did not waste any time and left Norios with everyone. With Rista joining the team, the Blacklight stealth became everyone's ride. It was extremely fast and agile, and they were no longer afraid of being intercepted or surrounded. Planet Golden Gate was not a large planet, but because it was located near Uberly Hub, it was very prosperous. There were many cities on Planet Golden Gate, and one needed to obtain a permit to build a base there. The Black Star Mercenary had a high reputation in the Garden Star system, and they had a good relationship with Ghidorah, so there were no problems in obtaining a permit. After spending a large sum of money, they were able to purchase a piece of land. In the Galactic Era, the efficiency of obtaining a permit was extremely fast. Furthermore, the universe was so huge and the population was sparse. The housing price of a normal colonial planet was unbelievably low. With the funds he had on hand, he did not have the intention to build a large main city. He did not have enough manpower, and he did not have enough money. What he needed was the first fixed base for his mercenary group. As for the structure of the base, it had to be large enough. Other than providing an area for the players to move around, there had to be space for the military factory. Secondly, it had to be divided into different areas so that the players would not get lost in the base. Furthermore, there had to be different functions for each area, and the exterior had to be grand. After all, it was a temporary main city for his faction, and it had to look more high-end. The amount of work required to build the base was too large, and Han Shao naturally did not do it personally. He contacted a construction team to design the blueprint, start the construction, purchase the raw materials, and transport the base. All of these required a large amount of funds. While he was building the first base for his mercenary group, Ashes finally returned to the Darkstar headquarters. The upper echelons of Darkstar held an official meeting regarding the Norios incident. In the Darkstar headquarters, more than 10 upper echelons were gathered together. Some were present personally, while others were present through virtual avatars. All of them covered their faces and sat around the table. The people in this room were the highest echelons of Darkstar. There were Calamity-grade supers, fleet commanders, and people in charge of logistics, intelligence, research, and so on. The identities of most of them were secrets that were not known by outsiders. The atmosphere was heavy. The traitor had survived, and the identities that they had been hiding were likely to be exposed. Everyone was in a terrible mood. Ashes was also in the room. After reaching the Calamity grade, he finally had the qualifications to sit at the table and join the ranks of the upper echelons. However, the other upper echelons would look at him unkindly from time to time. Because the mission had failed, everyone had to bear the risk of their identities being exposed. They could not help but blame Ashes, who was the only one who had returned. Sensing the gazes of the others, Ashes knew that he was in the wrong and could only remain silent. Beside him was an empty chair. This seat originally belonged to Anner, but it had now lost its owner. His respected teacher had died an unnatural death. Every time he saw the empty chair, Ashes would subconsciously think of Han Shao. His anger would then surge, and he could only barely suppress it. After a long period of silence, the leader of Dark Star said, "Anner died in battle, and the traitor was taken away by Ghidorah. This mission was a complete failure. Before the traitor touched the core information, I froze his authority. He only has a portion of the information, and this is the only good news," the person in charge of the intelligence department said with a hoarse voice. "Does the traitor know about the mutation virus?" "No, he does not know about our mission. This is a secret with a higher authority." "That's good. This plan is an important part of our strategy, and there must not be any mistakes. There is not much time left until the outbreak of the mutation virus. At that time, Ghidorah will have no choice but to send out a large number of people to protect the civilizations under their jurisdiction." The leader of Dark Star paused for a moment and did not continue this topic. "I am very disappointed with the outcome of this mission. Not only did we let the traitor go, we even lost a calamity-grade elder. Ashes, you have let me down." Ashes clenched his fists tightly and said with a deep voice, "There was an accident during the mission. You mean that as long as an accident occurs, you will not be able to deal with it?" Ashes could feel the coldness in the leader's voice and lowered his head, not replying. At this moment, another upper echelon said, "This is your first mission after becoming a grade A, and you are actually so shameful. Do you not feel ashamed? I really doubt if you have the right to enter this room." The person who spoke was the same as Anner, another calamity-grade elder. In fact, he had even more prestige. He was the vice leader, the right-hand man of the Dark Star leader. Ashes clenched his fists even tighter, but he did not retort. After becoming a calamity-grade super, he had been full of himself. However, he had failed miserably, and even he was starting to doubt himself. "I have seen the mission report. Ghidorah's Nagajan worked together with a mercenary to kill Anner. That mercenary is called Black Star." The leader of Dark Star opened the topic and did not allow the others to continue blaming Ashes. It was enough that he had pointed it out, and there was no need to continue humiliating him. "Kill him." Ashes did not hesitate. "He is one of AIM's men, and I do not wish to have a conflict with someone like the Dragon Emperor before the mutation virus plan begins," the leader of Dark Star said with a deep voice. "I will make that mercenary pay the price, but not now. He has gone against us time and time again, causing huge losses. This is an enemy that must be eliminated, and we cannot wait any longer." Ashes could not help but retort. He wished that he could turn Han Shao into ashes. "My intel shows that Black Star has built a base on planet Golden Gate, and that is Ghidorah's territory. If we want to get rid of him, we will have to mobilize a large number of fleets. Do you wish to interfere with the plan of the organization by clashing with Ghidorah at this juncture? This is worth it." Ashes clenched his teeth and was unwilling to give up. "Enough." The leader of Dark Star interrupted Ashes. "From now on, stop all external activities until the mutation virus erupts. I do not wish to repeat myself. The meeting ends here." Chapter 491. Garden Star System, Planet Golden Gate. The construction of the Black Star base was in full swing. The construction team that Han Shao had contacted was a professional construction company. In the galactic era, the efficiency of building buildings was extremely high, and the equipment was almost completely automated. Laying the foundation, applying cement, building walls, laying cables, and other time-consuming tasks could be completed quickly. As long as the raw materials were in place, the construction team would be able to build the building according to the blueprint in a short amount of time. More than 10 days passed in the blink of an eye, and a steel base rose from the ground. This base was large enough to accommodate around 70 to 80,000 people, and the terrain was simple. According to the blueprint, the base was split into a few functional areas. However, the construction had not started yet, and the base was still an empty shell. With 5 million anas, Han Shao was no longer short on cash. He did some calculations. He wanted to build an assembly line for the military factory, set up the basic equipment for the base, and build a mainframe to control the base. He had to build all of these himself, and he mainly had to spend money on the materials. Next, he had to solve the transportation problem. Buying spaceships was too expensive, so he was prepared to work with some galactic travel agencies and rent their spaceships for a long time. After deducting these expenses, he still had about 2 to 3 million anas left. The transportation problem was not urgent, and it would only be useful when the players returned. Han Xiao first started to build an assembly line. Assembling an assembly line was the prerequisite for the army style, and it required a lot of advanced knowledge and corresponding high-end knowledge. Han Xiao had already learned most of the advanced knowledge, and his huge amount of funds allowed him to buy new high-end knowledge. He spent a few 100,000 anas to buy the high-end knowledge of the armed class, huge duplex machinery technology. This knowledge was one of the prerequisites for building super-large machinery, such as battleships. Based on the knowledge in his memory, he fused the key blueprint, automated mass assembly plan, which was the blueprint of an assembly line. This was the core of the army style. As long as the raw materials were put in, the assembly line would be able to automatically mass produce, saving time and energy, but not money. The assembly line was a special type of blueprint that could not be created by itself. If a player used the assembly line blueprint, they would first trigger the assembly line blueprint, causing it to enter an active state. Then, they would use the blueprint of another type of machine to create the assembly line of that machine. The assembly process of every machine was different. For example, the assembly of the Rangers and the assembly of the Black Panther mechanical beasts were different. Therefore, the assembly lines of different machines had to be built separately, and the raw materials would change according to the composition of the target machine. This was enough to make any player's wallet feel despair. Otherwise, why would the army style be said to be the fastest way to burn money? Currently, Han Zhao's main combat system was the Third Company of Workers, which focused on low cost. It was still far from the true army style. The main reason was that he did not have much money to burn back then, so he was extremely bored. Now that he had ample funds on hand, he could finally put the plan of building an army style on the agenda. After all, the combat power of a mechanic was directly related to money. Han Zhao's secondary profession, ordnance engineer, had the specialty ordnance mass production experience. It was a skill that could reduce the cost of assembly lines and increase the quality of products. Other than building a large-scale mech legion, the other goal of the assembly line was to mass-produce equipment that the players were willing to buy. When the time came, they would sell on a large scale. Then, he would open branches, and one branch would become 2, 2 branches would become 4 branches would become 8 branches, and after 8 branches, they would be listed on the stock market. Then, they would be listed separately, and just the dividends would be cough, cough. That was the general idea. Just thinking about it made the great mechanic Han's mood feel like the sun was shining brightly on a sunny day. The higher the grade of the machine, the more complicated the assembly line would be. Even with Han Zhao's current assembly speed using mechanical force, it would take him a few days to complete an assembly line. Therefore, the assembly line of the machine was very important. After thinking about it, he decided to focus on low-grade machines because his level was too much higher than the players. To him, they were low-grade machines, but they were suitable for players around LV60. As for high-quality machines, there was no need for an assembly line. Han Xiao was currently LV-116. Because he had encountered the Norios incident after his promotion, he did not have the time to upgrade his core machines. Building a base happened to be a long-term job, so he had plenty of time to upgrade. Because of Anner's reward, the experience in his interface had increased to more than 300 million. He first raised the automated mass production and assembly plan to the maximum level, greatly reducing the cost. Then, he gambled on a large number of different low-grade machines and chose suitable blueprints to build an assembly line. With his understanding of the mechanic class and the players, he could guarantee that the machines he mass-produced would all be useful. The assembly line was a big project. Before this, he had built a mainframe for the base and let Philip manage the base. The first assembly line he built was the assistant robot production line. Letting Philip, an artificial intelligence, control the assistant robot would be very useful. It would be equivalent to killing the farmers at the start of the game. Philip followed the blueprints he had left behind and ordered more and more assistant robots to complete the layout of the different areas of the base, adding furniture, access doors, equipment, and other miscellaneous things. Han Xiao did not have to watch over them personally. The preparation plan for version 2.0 required everyone to stay in the base for a long time. Haluz did not have any objections. He believed that Han Xiao had a plan, and the others did not have any objections either. For example, the three Volga brothers and Sylvia could do anything with Han Xiao. Fu Ding would not leave before he completely suppressed Morningstar. Rista was very patient. He had waited for so many years, so he did not mind waiting a little longer. He also did not mind letting Han Xiao use his body. Wilsander returned to Floating Dragon, and only Han Xiao and the others were left. Han Xiao was very clear that Floating Dragon definitely knew about his actions in building the base, but Ames did not ask about it. This meant that Ames allowed him to strengthen the armed forces, and this trust made him feel gratified. Because they needed to build the base, Han Xiao's core team stopped accepting jobs. Only the Sunil team was still active. The news spread very quickly in the galaxy, and the news of Han Xiao building a base was interpreted differently by many organizations. They felt that this was a signal. Could it be that the Dragon Emperor had finally started to strengthen the armed forces under her command like the other three beyond Grade A supers? All along, Han Xiao's Floating Dragon field team had more symbolic meaning than actual meaning. This action immediately made many organizations pay close attention to it. The construction of the base progressed step by step. Time passed, and the sun rose and set. As time passed, all the planets where Darkstar had secretly placed the mutation source began to slowly awaken from their slumber. That's how it is. In the past 2 days, there have been more than 2,700 riots in the world, and more than 100,000 people have been involved. This is only the situation that we have detected. The Intelligence Department has investigated the identities of all the rioters. The rioters are from all walks of life, and they are scattered in different cities. There were no signs before the riots, and there is no pattern to follow. Currently, most of the rioters have been detained by the law enforcement agencies of the Six Nations, and the reason is being investigated. A Darknet intelligence officer was reading the report. Bennett sat on the chair and frowned. He was slightly older than 2 years ago. After Han Xiao left, the social environment of Blue Star had finally calmed down. The Six Nations had rested and stopped fighting, and the refugees had found a place to go. However, in the past 2 days, riots had suddenly occurred in many areas of Blue Star. The number of cases was high, and it immediately attracted the attention of the Six Nations and Bennett. Your Excellency, we have sorted out the process of all the riots and found a common point. The intelligence officer swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and his tone was filled with fear. Speak, Bennett said with a deep voice. All the riots can be divided into 3 batches, and the time of each batch is almost exactly the same. This means that within a 10-second interval, riots occurred in hundreds of different locations around the world at the same time. It is as though they had agreed to it beforehand. However, we have checked the network records, and these people did not contact each other privately. Bennett's eyes narrowed. This situation was too abnormal. The intelligence officer's palms were sweaty, and he continued with difficulty. Furthermore, the locations of the riots included a few of our shelters. Many of the refugees that we have taken and also rioted. How are the conditions of those refugees? The refugees that we have taken and have fever all over their bodies, and they are unconscious. The results of the doctor's examination showed that their brains are abnormally active, causing their organs to produce hormones that far exceed normal levels. According to the intelligence of our informants, the rioters that the Six Nations have captured are also in the same situation. Bennett was shocked and angry at the same time. Everyone is unconscious? Are they infected with the same infectious disease? Not everyone. A small portion of the detained refugees have already woken up. They clearly remember the entire process, and their testimonies are shockingly consistent. They all said that they suddenly felt a strong sense of anger and wanted to destroy something to vent their anger. Our doctors checked the bodies of these people who have woken up, but they did not detect any abnormalities. There are no problems with their physiological indicators. Even the fever that they had when they were unconscious has disappeared, and everything has become normal. We can't find out what is going on, so we have quarantined these people. So far, there have been no riots for 18 hours. Is quarantining really useful? The groups of the 3 large-scale riots are completely different, and there is no warning. If this is really an unknown virus that cannot be detected, I am afraid that the number of infected people. Thinking of this, Bennett could not help but take a deep breath. His expression was ugly. He had a strong feeling that this matter was not so simple. The war is over, and the world has finally ushered in peace. Why did this happen? Suddenly, he thought of Han Xiao and the catastrophe prophecy that Han Xiao had left behind before he left. The current situation was very similar to what Han Xiao had described. Could it be that what Black Phantom said was true? Clang! Bennett stood up suddenly, knocked over the chair, put on his coat, and hurried out of the room. Chapter 492. The plane landed on the tarmac of Sanctuary 3. Bennett adjusted his collar, adjusted his hat, and got off the plane. Looking around, everything was peaceful. There were no riots here yet. A group of men in black stood on the tarmac. The current person in charge of Sanctuary 3, Huang Yu, had been waiting there for a long time with his subordinates. You could have just called if you needed anything, Huang Yu said respectfully. You didn't have to come here personally. Bennett waved his hand and signaled for Huang Yu to lead the way. I need to meet a few people. It's urgent. Have you informed them? I did as you instructed. They're waiting for you in the meeting room. The group came to the core area of the sanctuary. After passing through the complicated corridors, they arrived at the meeting room. Bennett asked the bodyguards to wait outside and walked into the meeting room with Huang Yu. There were 3 women in the room. They were Hela, Aurora, and Yi Yeching. They all turned around and focused their eyes on Bennett. Your Excellency. Hela was expressionless. She nodded slightly. Aurora was not squeezed, so Hela did not go to the extreme. Although she was still cold, she was not stingy with her respect for someone like Bennett. Let's cut to the chase. I still have 2 experiments to do today. Why did you call us here? Yi Yeching went straight to the point. Bennett's face was serious. He took out a few riot reports and distributed them to the 3 of them. More than a year ago, you guys reported some unusual situations. I didn't pay attention to it then, but the current situation might be related to the phenomenon you guys mentioned. You guys are the talents left behind by Black Phantom, and you know about his disaster prediction. I want to know what you think. Because Hela and the other 2 were the talents that Han Xiao asked him to take care of, Bennett did not restrict their freedom. Before Han Xiao left, Hela kept saying that she would travel the world after Aurora recovered. However, Han Xiao disappeared for more than 2 years. Aurora had recovered, but Hela did not leave and stayed in the sanctuary. Bennett naturally wouldn't chase them away. Aurora's supernatural ability allowed her to sense life forms. The huge life form that she had detected back then had disappeared after a few days. However, Aurora had remembered the scent of this life form. This was one of the functions of her supernatural ability. She could record life forms like a unique barcode that she could easily distinguish. Although the giant life form was just a flash in the pan, she found that some of the creatures had the smell of the giant life form. This smell was constantly spreading, and more creatures were infected with the smell, regardless of whether they were plants or animals. Aurora's voice was timid as she slowly explained what she felt. Bennett's expression became more and more solemn. If this was really a virus, then at least 100 million people in the world had been infected. No, if ferocious beasts and a sea of plants were added into the mix, then the number of infections would be terrifying. Aurora looked at them and hesitated for a moment. Then, she mustered up her courage and pointed at Huang Yu. She whispered, "He also has that smell on him." Huang Yu's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly touched his body. I don't feel anything. Bennett clasped Huang Yu's shoulder and sent his energy into Huang Yu's body through his fingers. After probing back and forth a few times, Bennett released his hand and said in a deep voice, "I also can't sense any abnormalities. What kind of virus is this? Although I don't know how it works, it seems that only Aurora can tell who has been infected." Everyone looked at Aurora. Aurora trembled as her big eyes were filled with nervousness and expectation. She stammered, Can I help?" Bennett wanted to show a kind smile, but the situation was urgent and he couldn't smile. He could only nod his head with a solemn face. Aurora was extremely happy. She had always been taken care of by others. She had long been looking forward to doing something to repay those who had helped her. Yeching flipped through the report. Not only was she not surprised, she was even excited. Sure enough, my senses were right. My research for a year wasn't in vain. As soon as she said that, everyone present immediately looked over with a surprised expression. "What do you mean by that?" Bennett asked. "Follow me." Yeching stood up and impatiently walked out. The others had no choice but to follow her. After passing through the heavily guarded area, they arrived at Yeching's laboratory area. There was no one here. Even the guards didn't dare to stay here. They were afraid that inhaling some strange chemical fog would lead to coma, nervous disorder, hemiplegia, loss of fertility, and other adverse effects. Yeching brought them to an open-air greenhouse. This was a plant nursery. Yeching's ability was to control plants. Most of the raw materials for her drugs were the various plants that she had grown herself. In this nursery, there was only one kind of plant. Its shape was a fan-shaped green leaf that grew out of the soil. With such a normal appearance, if ordinary people saw in the wild, they wouldn't give it a second glance. This is the Rhodian fan leaf. It grows in a harsh environment and is very difficult to artificially cultivate. It is an endangered plant. There are very few of them left in the world. However, the scarcity doesn't mean that it is very valuable. In fact, the Rhodian fan leaf has no medicinal properties. Its only use is to grind it into a paste and cook it before eating, as long as you're a herbivore. In short, this plant has almost no cultivation value. Yeching's simple introduction confused everyone, but you still cultivated so many. "Why did you bring us to see this thing?" Bennett asked. At this time, Aurora stretched out her finger and curiously touched a fan leaf. Suddenly, her eyes widened and she said in surprise, "These plants don't have that kind of smell." Bennett was shocked. He thought of something and his face was filled with surprise. "You are right. A year ago, I noticed that some plants were giving me the feeling of being spied on. It attracted my attention. I searched everywhere and found that this plant is the only plant that doesn't give off the feeling of being spied on. I don't know the specific reason for the feeling of being spied on, but I know that the Rhodian fan leaf can be immune to it, so I started cultivating it. The Rhodian fan leaf is extremely difficult to grow, and the seeds are rare. These fan leaves in front of you are all I have." Yeching confirmed everyone's guess. "Have you conducted any clinical trials?" "I have only experimented on plants. I extracted the juice of the Rhodian fan leaf and added some auxiliary materials to make a drug that can make the feeling of being spied on by other plants disappear for a period of time. It has a suppressive effect." "That's great. We don't have time to waste, and I don't know if the riots will happen again. I will get someone to send a portion of the isolated rioters over, and you can test the effects of the drug on them." Bennett was very decisive. At this time, he could not be bothered about the side effects of the drug. He was extremely glad that Yeching had made a plan in advance. At the very least, it was much better than the 6 nations that were at their wits' end. "All right, but there is something that I have to tell you first. Because the Rhodian fan leaf is very rare, the production of the drug is very limited. Furthermore, the amount of juice collected at one time cannot be too much, or the fan leaf will wither and die. It will not be able to be used for a long time, and it is extremely difficult to cultivate a single one." Yeching shrugged. In the storyline of his previous life, Yeching had only escaped from the Bell of Death Island after the mutation disaster had completely erupted. After a long period of research, she had finally developed the formula for the suppressive drug. However, Han Xiao had brought her out from the Bell of Death Island a long time ago and given her the freedom to research it. This time, due to the changes that Han Xiao had made to the storyline, she had developed the suppressive drug when a mutation disaster had just shown its first signs. The suppressive drug could not destroy the mutation disaster and could only temporarily suppress it. However, it was an extremely rare method to deal with the mutation disaster and was extremely important. In his previous life, the Six Nations had fought over Yeching in order to obtain the formula for the suppressive drug. Currently, Yeching was in Sanctuary 3 and was under the protection of Bennett. Whether or not this would cause the sanctuary to be targeted by the Six Nations was still unknown. However, Han Xiao, who was far away in space, had exchanged Yeching for a long-term plan. He wanted Sanctuary 3 to be the first place to develop the suppressive drug, which would attract the players to swarm over to the sanctuary. He had long predicted this step. Aurora had been saved by him, and she had not turned into paste. Her Esper ability allowed her to differentiate the infected, which was also an important factor in changing the storyline. As the mutation virus had an extremely strong latent ability, after the mutation disaster had erupted, everyone had become paranoid and worried that their companions would turn into enemies at any moment. There was no longer any trust to speak of. However, Aurora could at least prevent such a situation from happening in Sanctuary 3. In fact, many people would take the initiative to come to the sanctuary in search of this peace of mind. Under the influence of Han Xiao, Bennett and the others were able to react in advance. Han Technician had started planning for version 2.0 a long time ago, and the results were gradually showing. The few of them left the nursery. As they walked on the road, Hela suddenly asked, if this is the disaster that he predicted, will he come back like he promised? Everyone stopped in their tracks. Everyone there had a close relationship with Han Xiao. Every time Black Phantom was mentioned, their expressions would become very complicated. Maybe, Bennett sighed, Black Phantom had said that he had gone into the galaxy to find a solution to the disaster, but there had been no news from him for 2 years. They had no idea what Han Xiao had encountered in the galaxy. The galaxy was very mysterious to them. It was a higher and farther world, and it could also be said to be the real world. It made people curious, but at the same time, it made people flinch. Every time they looked up at the stars, they would think that Han Xiao was there, but there was no way to contact him. Until now, Bennett did not have much hope. Even Hela felt that the chances were slim. She took out the key that Han Xiao had left for her and held it in her hand. She lowered her eyes and covered the light in her eyes. He might never come back. Han Xiao, who was far away in the galaxy, did not purposely observe the situation in Blue Star. He had long known about the stages of the mutation disaster, and there was no need for him to see it with his own eyes. Time was money, and wasting time was wasting money. This was unacceptable. In version 2.0, the players would only descend after the mutation disaster had completely erupted. He had calculated the time, and the signs of the mutation disaster would only appear 1 or 2 months before the release of the version. Then, the virus would leave the incubation period, and the phenomenon would start to spread. In the end, it would turn into a disaster. This was an important juncture for the players to enter the galaxy. There are only a few chances in a player's life, and if he could grab hold of it, he would be able to soar. Han Xiao made his preparations step by step without any distractions, as Han Xiao's preparations were crossed off one by one. Chapter 493. The stars were shining brightly, and rivers of light surrounded them, brightening up the dark universe. The shining stars were incomparably distant, and every one of them represented a race, a civilization, and a thought. It was like looking down at the lights of tens of thousands of people from an airplane flying in the night sky. It was vast and boundless, yet full of vitality. Through the porthole, the outline of planet Golden Gate gradually became clearer. Spaceships of all shapes and sizes could be seen taking off and landing on this colonized planet of Godora. The aura of prosperity seemed to be able to spread out in space, and even those who were watching from afar could feel this prosperity. This was a medium-sized, long-distance travel spaceship, and it was a common model. It had a gray steel shell, a normal hyperdrive engine, and a secondary electromagnetic shield. The official price was between 750,000 to 900,000 ANAs, and second-hand spaceships were 30% cheaper. If one had connections in the shipbuilding factory, they could even buy it for 170,000 ANAs. There was a bright yellow crown on the side of the spaceship, and this was a rental spaceship that belonged to the Crown Galactic Travel Agency. A month ago, this travel agency had reached a long-term rental agreement with a Black Star mercenary for 13 spaceships. The rental fee was much lower than the selling price, but it was not cheap either. At this moment, this spaceship that temporarily belonged to the Black Star mercenary was carrying dozens of mercenaries, and they were flying toward planet Golden Gate. These mercenaries were the new members that had been recruited into the Black Star mercenary a few months ago. During the 1 year of preparation, after Han Xiao had completed the production line, he had made use of the reputation of the mercenary group to recruit hundreds of freelance mercenaries to increase the number of NPCs in the mercenary group. These new mercenaries had been split into different groups to make it easier to command them. To deal with the mutation disaster, just relying on Haluz and a few others would not be enough. There was no need to control the scale anymore, and the more people there were, the better. Han Technician had never been stingy with his initial investment, and he would feel uncomfortable if he did not spend money. Black Star suddenly gathered everyone. I wonder if there's some big operation going on. We are Floating Dragon's troops in name. Could it be that the Dragon Emperor has given us some orders? I've asked around, and no one knows what Black Star wants to do. Even the officers are not sure. Everyone else is here. We're the last to arrive. I hope we won't delay anything. While these mercenaries were chatting, the spaceship landed at the spaceport closest to the base on planet Golden Gate. Stepping on the ground, dozens of mercenaries of all shapes and sizes hurried on. Not long after, the group of them stopped in front of a huge base. This base was octagonal in shape and was surrounded by alloy walls that were filled with automatic cannons. The architectural style was that of a huge metal castle. Its black shell reflected the light of the sun, and its shape was like that of countless metal towers pieced together. More than a dozen tall metal obelisks pointed to the sky, like a dozen chips of uneven height. The structure of the building was angular, with a precise and tight mechanical feeling. In addition to a large area of iron gray, white and red paint extended along the edges, adding a slight sense of beauty to this heavy base. The blue light dots distributed on various facilities were full of a technological aura. This was the result of Han Zhao's 1 year of hard work. Black Star Base Number 1. The mercenaries came to the door, and a complicated verification interface popped up on the screen. After this group of people verified their identities as members of Black Star, the door slowly opened, and a synthesized voice sounded from the screen. Verification passed. Welcome back, Philip, how's your day? A mercenary joked. Work, can't chat. The group of people walked into the base. The layout of the interior was not complicated. In the middle was a huge space that was hollowed out, and metal bridges of different heights led to different areas. It was clear at a glance like a beehive. This central area was called the mouth by the mercenaries. The base was too big, and even if there were tens of thousands of people, it would not be able to fill it. Furthermore, the mercenary group only had a few hundred people, so the interior of the base was very spacious. This group of mercenaries chatted as they walked toward the hall, and their voices echoed in the huge space. When they arrived at the hall of the base, they saw that a few hundred people were already waiting there. They were silent, and the atmosphere was solemn. The group of people stopped talking and hurriedly followed behind the group. The few hundred people present were all the current members of the mercenary group. They were all wearing different types of armor, carrying swords, knives, axes, hammers, guns, and cannons. They were tall, short, fat, thin, human, and beast. However, The one thing that they all had in common was that every single one of them exuded an elite aura. It was obvious that they had been through hundreds of battles and were not to be trifled with. At the front of the group, the officers under Black Star stood in a row, leaving only their backs to the few hundred people behind them. Haluz, who was wearing blue and white armor, Aroshia, who was glowing all over, the three Volga brothers who looked like they were made from the same mold, and the three new officers who joined a few months ago. Fu Ding and Sylvia stood further away. At this time, a hole appeared in the metal floor in front of everyone, and a figure appeared in front of everyone on the elevator. His black cloak fluttered in the wind, and he was wearing a compressed orb necklace, bracelet, earrings, and a pure black mask that covered his face. It was Han Xiao. After a year, Han Xiao had changed into a more imposing outfit and put on a mask like the German organization leader. He felt that he looked more handsome this way. After all, he was someone with a fixed business, so he had to look more cool. Furthermore, this pure black mask was a piece of mechanical equipment in itself. As soon as he appeared, everyone's eyes were focused on him, waiting for his instructions. "Is everyone here?" Han Xiao scanned the crowd, his eyes sweeping across the faces. These mercenaries were recruited by him personally. Floating Dragon's name and the reputation of the mercenary group were indeed useful. Most of them were strong lone wolves who had been through hundreds of battles and were very reliable. They could be split into 3 factions. One was the former freelance mercenaries who had not joined a group, one was the Senil team, and one was the battle alliance that one of the new officers had brought. After the construction of the base was completed, he did not stay in the base all the time. Instead, he took the time to travel to different planets and recruited 3 new officers based on his memories and intelligence. They were all famous people in his previous life. Serene, a Sunil, a grey-bee pugilist. He was wearing a white hooded combat robe. The material looked soft, but it was actually engraved with defensive enchantments. His face was hidden in the shadow of the hood, and there were 2 sword handles on his waist that could be ejected at any time. When they first met, this appearance almost made Han Xiao think that he had run out of XX Creed. This person was the other Grade B super of the Guardian faction of the Sunil civilization who was still working for the race. Back then, when Furness brought his people and left the race, Serend was not included. He was quiet, just like his fast and strange pugilist style. He was like an assassin hiding in the shadows, the complete opposite of Herlu's pugilist style. Han Xiao found the lone Serend and sent him an invitation. As the reputation of the Black Star mercenary increased, more and more Sunil supers joined the Black Star mercenary group. It was safe and earned more money. It could also be said that Han Xiao had given them protection. Under Herlu's persuasion, Serend accepted Han Xiao's invitation and moved together. The Sunil team was now led by Herluz and Serend. The second new officer was Jeanette Conlin. She was a female space human and a Grade B cannon master. She carried all kinds of heavy firearms all over her body, and the heavy machinery covered her tall and sexy body. She worshipped the belief that firepower was supreme. Jeanette was a rather famous lone wolf mercenary. In Han Zhao's previous life, she had joined the Sky Ring Army and became one of the most famous figures. When Han Xiao was collecting information on the freelance mercenaries, he had seen her. Thus, he had the idea to secretly poach Jeanette from the Sky Ring Army and poach her into his mercenary group. Of course, the process was not smooth. Jeanette had a fiery temper, and she did not even care about Floating Dragon. Han Xiao had come up with a small plan and purposely interfered with one of Jeanette's missions, creating a situation where the two of them had a conflict, and naturally, they had fought. Han Xiao had defeated her a few times before Jeanette finally gave in and was recruited into the Black Star Mercenary. Han Xiao had promised to provide her with heavy weapons at a low price. Jeanette was passionate about collecting all kinds of firearms, so she did not have any objections. The third officer had an even bigger background. He was a protagonist-type character, and Han Xiao had spent a lot of effort to convince him to join, just like how he had tricked Toulouse back then. Harmon Rockfall Sonodin was a Luhan beastman. He was more than 3 meters tall and had fur all over his body. He looked a little like a bear man and looked quite cute. However, he was a ferocious warrior race. The Luhan Beastmen had their own civilization located in another star cluster. Their ruling system was a tribal alliance system, and Harmon was a candidate for the chieftain of the Rockfall tribe. Although the Luhan Beastmen were a galactic civilization, they had retained their warlike, barbaric, and martial traditions. When a tribe needed to elect the next chieftain, it was not a peaceful vote, but a battle. All the candidates would be chased out of their mother planet and randomly landed on different planets. They would be required to train themselves in the galaxy and form their own war league at the same time. When the time limit was reached, everyone would bring their team back to their mother planet to participate in the war league of the other candidates. In other words, it was a battle between the princes for the right to succeed the throne. Harmon was a protagonist-type character, and the storyline for him was to help him obtain the position of chieftain of the Rockfall tribe. When he was tricking Harmon, Han Shao had triggered this mission. This mission was simple and straightforward from the beginning to the end. In his previous life, after players completed this side mission, the process would become an instance dungeon. Completing daily missions in the Rockfall tribe would give you instance dungeon crystals, so Han Shao remembered it very clearly. The method to recruit Harmon was naturally to accept an ancient ceremony to become his war league and help him in the war league of the future. Harmon was not alone. He had also brought along his war league to join the mercenary group. There were dozens of strong Luhan Beastmen warriors. Harmon had the strength of AB rank, and his ability was only a simple body-strengthening ability, causing his muscles to swell. It was not that Han Shao wanted to ridicule him, but it really gave him a sense of déjà vu. The effect of his ability was simple, but Harmon was proficient in all kinds of weapons and was a warrior with exquisite combat skills. Han Shao had seen his attributes before, and he had a total of 6 warrior subclasses. His brain was filled with muscles, and he was extremely fierce. It was said that the heavens were to the left, while the warriors were to the right. Harmon would probably smash his head into the frame on the right. The 3 new officers were filled with fresh blood, and the number of capable helpers under his command had increased. At the same time, the reward for the faction had also increased greatly. Currently, the maximum reward for a single mission was over 1 million experience points, and the total daily reward was more than 20 times that. This meant that through the faction missions, he could reward players with more than 20 million experience points. Recruiting NPC members was to attract more players. Opening the communication terminal, Han Shao glanced at the mercenary group interface. Black Star Mercenary Credibility Points, 1018, credibility level, high, total scale, 417D rank, 47C rank, 359B rank, 11 missions completed, 82 main area of activity, Colton Star Cluster History, Sunil Defense War, Silver Rescue Operation, Pursuit of Purple Germ Civilization Rebel Leader Pilipalapa Wisasa, Norios Battle, 78 remaining missions. Collapse/Expand, Founder, Black Star, Han Shao Date of Creation, October 2nd 688 Evaluation, Medium-Sized Mercenary Group. High credibility, good reputation, completed many missions with high evaluations. Has a cooperative relationship with many large mercenary groups. It is a field team under the Dragon Emperor, and its base is located on planet Golden Gate in the Garden Star system. Leader Black Star once assisted in killing a Calamity-grade super in Norios. His strength is unpredictable and trustworthy. Today is the big day of the start of version 2.0. After waiting for almost a year, we have finally reached this step. These people should be enough. Han Shao nodded in his mind. In the past year, he had done many things and made ample preparations. There were a total of 23 production lines in the base, and he only had about 1 million left out of his 5 million. Most of it had been spent on materials, making the production lines produce machinery day and night. The inventory in the warehouse was piled up like a mountain. The 1-year interest-free period of the loan was about to exceed. According to Rockfest's request, he would have to pay back the interest after a year. Han Xiao was waiting to earn it back from the players. His experience on the interface had long fallen below the 100 million mark. Han Xiao was still at level 116. He had spent his experience gambling blueprints and leveling up his skills, so he urgently needed to replenish it. He still had a mission completion card in his hands. If he had enough experience, he could even directly advance to level 140. It was impossible not to look forward to it. Putting away his thoughts, Han Xiao looked at everyone and said with a deep voice, "Today, I've gathered everyone to conduct a large-scale operation. My hometown is facing a calamity. Their vision is limited to the planet and cannot see what I see. I'm their only savior." The mercenaries below looked at each other. Black Star's hometown? Was it that native planet called Blue Star? I will fight for you, just as you will fight for me. Harmon raised his fist and pounded his chest. I will be by your side, as always. Haluz nodded. All the mercenaries in the hall responded. Looking at the time, it was about time. Han Xiao opened the interface and waited silently. Not long after, a new notification appeared. Version 2.0 activated. Retrieving data complete. Player forum opened. Welcome to Galaxy, version 2.0. After preparing for so long, version 2.0 was finally here. Han Zhao's eyes flashed, and he walked toward the door. The crowd automatically opened a path for him. Hundreds of elite mercenaries followed behind him in a grandiose manner. Chapter 494. Garden Star System, Star Zone 9, Blue Star. The southern continent was experiencing a scorching summer. The sun hung high in the sky, and the air was distorted by the high temperature. The moment version 2.0 was activated, the originally empty square in Sanctuary 3 was filled with players one after another. Hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. The originally empty square was filled with players in just a few seconds. Before the version update, due to the Last Stand mission left by Han Xiao and Galaxy Time's analysis of the main storyline of version 2.0, hundreds of thousands of Blue Star players gathered in Sanctuary 3 and chose to go offline there. Now that version 2.0 was activated, the place where these hundreds of thousands of players went online was Sanctuary 3. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered and looked around curiously. Is it version 2.0 now? There doesn't seem to be any changes. Sigh, the level cap has increased, and EXP can be used to level up. It is indeed a new version. Are there no other changes? I really just want to try pooping in the game. Pants strippers, please have some self-respect. The players discussed among themselves and opened their interfaces to check their attributes. Other than the level cap, there were no other changes to their personal information. However, very soon, someone realized that a mission notification had changed. It was the Last Stand, and the mission status had changed from frozen to activated. This was a prize pool mission left by Han Xiao before he left. The mission requirement was to protect Sanctuary 3 as a prelude to the mutation disaster and attract players to gather there. As he expected, this mission was suspected by the players to be related to the storyline of version 2.0. Now, this mission had actually been activated. Didn't this mean that the calamity in the mission notification had already begun? All the players were excited. Thanks to Black Phantom, they had barely participated in the main storyline in the previous version. This time, there was finally a major event that they could participate in. Right, the NPC who issued this mission was still Black Star. Oh, now he was called Black Star. Was he still in the galaxy? Once they thought of Han Xiao, many players could not help but be envious of the group of professional players who had been taken away by him. They had stepped into the galaxy earlier and were much better than them in terms of food, clothing, and equipment. Just as the players were observing, an announcement suddenly sounded in the sanctuary. All Inhumans, please stay where you are. I repeat, all Inhumans, please stay where you are. Soon, a large number of guards surrounded the plaza, their faces filled with shock and bewilderment as they stared nervously at the large crowd of players. All the Inhumans on the planet had disappeared for a whole year, but they suddenly appeared today, which shocked the management of Sanctuary 3. Bennett quickly sent people to control the scene. At the same time, the players in Sanctuary 3 triggered the same mission. Stay where you are, mission introduction. While you were gone, many things happened to Blue Star. Right now, it's a critical moment for the survival of our civilization. Stay where you are and wait patiently for the relevant personnel to explain the situation. This was a small mission, and the reward was not much. It just so happened that the players also wanted to understand the situation. Hundreds of thousands of people obediently stayed in the square, mainly because they were surrounded by guards. God knew if they would be attacked if they left rashly. No one wanted to lose the shelter's reputation at the beginning of the version. Not long after, Bennett hurried over. Looking at the sea of people, his eyes flashed with joy. He recalled what Han Shao had said before, saying that the Inhumans were the backbone of the resistance against this catastrophe. At such a critical moment, the Inhumans had appeared once again. He did not know the reason, but he knew that the Inhumans had come the right time, and they were in urgent need of manpower. Bennett took out a loudspeaker and said loudly, "Everyone, Blue Star is facing an unprecedented disaster, and we urgently need help." He quickly explained the situation. Only then did the players know that it had been more than a year since the previous version. More than a month ago, a strange phenomenon had spread rapidly on planet Aquamarine and finally turned into a catastrophe that swept across the entire planet. Blue Star called it the mutation disaster. It had been a month since the mutation disaster had fully erupted, and the entire planet was in turmoil. The Six Nations regime had collapsed in just a month. No one knew the cause of the disaster, and they only knew that it was some kind of virus, which they called the mutation virus. Countless creatures, humans, beasts, and even plants were infected, but no one could find out what the mutation virus looked like, how it spread, and how it worked. No one knew if they were infected or not. Before the virus broke out, every infected person was no different from normal. However, the moment it broke out, the infected person would suddenly have unusual desires, including but not limited to killing intent, desire to destroy, anger, sadness, madness, lust, hunger, thirst, and so on. A weak person could suddenly become a butcher who killed without batting an eyelid. A normal person could suddenly squat down and crazily swallow sand until they died, and a dignified woman could suddenly become a slut. The most frightening thing was that when the virus broke out, the infected person still maintained their rationality. This meant that they did not lose control or act rashly. Instead, these desires guided their thoughts and led them to do all sorts of things. According to the memories of the survivors, when the virus broke out, these desires came from the bottom of their hearts, and they were their true thoughts at that time. It was as if their personalities had been changed by someone, and they had become another person. However, they did not realize it and felt that their actions were normal when the virus broke out. Bennett gave a few examples, and the confused players immediately understood how frightening the mutation disaster was. Maple was the first place where the virus broke out on a large scale. The infected people in the army picked up their guns and started to kill their comrades. The army instantly fell into chaos, and no one knew which soldier was the infected. A civil war broke out, and tanks, helicopters, rockets, and other weapons were used. A large-scale outbreak of the virus broke out, and almost half of Maple's military strength was destroyed. The president even showed serious violent tendencies and wanted to plant mushrooms all over the world. Luckily, launching a nuclear bomb required a complicated process. If the button to launch the bomb was on the president's desk, the world would have been destroyed and the president would have been arrested after the incident. All sorts of ridiculous things that could not happen under normal circumstances happened without any warning. It was not scary for one person to go crazy, but what was scary was for the entire world to go crazy. No one knew when the people around them would break out, and they could not even guarantee that they were not normal. This fear was unparalleled, and it was as if the entire world had become their enemy. No one dared to trust anyone else, and they were in a constant state of panic. A month after the outbreak of the mutation disaster, social order had collapsed, and many prosperous cities have become wastelands. For safety, the citizens had no choice but to migrate or find a place to hide. Pessimism became the mainstream, and a view of the mutation disaster became popular all over the world. They believed that the nuclear radiation was the cause of the virus. Thus, countless citizens started to curse the germinal organization war that had brought them peace. They believed that this was retribution and doomsday. After hearing the introduction, many players felt a chill in their hearts. Thinking about it, this virus was too scary. Originally, the players had all sorts of guesses about the so-called disaster of version 2.0, but they did not expect it to be such a strange situation. What exactly was the mutation virus? For a moment, the players were stunned. The flow of time during the update was not synchronized. In the eyes of the players, the update had only been a few days, and the world that they were familiar with had been turned upside down. Was it that exciting? Does this mean that there is no cure for this virus? A player asked. Bennett shook his head. Currently, we have found 2 ways to resist the mutation virus. Firstly, supers are not easily infected, and this has been verified. Secondly, our Sanctuary 3 has developed a suppressant that can make people immune to the virus for a period of time. However, the production is limited, and we are working hard to cultivate the raw materials. However, the quantity is far from enough. The moment he said that, the interface of the players changed, and they triggered the main storyline mission. Mutation disaster. Mission introduction. The Blue Star is facing an unprecedented disaster. Resisting the mutation disaster is the responsibility of all living beings on this planet. Mission requirements. Contribute to the fight against the mutation disaster. Progress. 0/30 000 success condition. Achieve progress before the mutation virus becomes complete. Failure condition. The Blue Star civilization will collapse, and all survivors will be forced to evacuate. Reward. Depends on personal progress and contribution. Note, even if the growth of the virus causes the overall progress to decrease, the personal progress will still be included in the reward. The mission requirements of the players were similar to Han Zhao's, but the players' mutation disaster mission requirement was only the 30 million progress of the Blue Star civilization. On the other hand, Han Zhao's mission requirement included all the other planets that had the mutation disaster. Obviously, the Han Technician's mission was more complete. This was a large-scale main storyline mission that all the players had to do together. The contribution of every player would be included in the overall progress, and they had to work together to achieve the mission goal. We triggered the main storyline mission the moment we went online. The storyline of this version is so fast. No need for foreplay, just straight to the point. I like to be so direct. No, we received the main storyline mission directly because we went online in Sanctuary 3. This place allows us to enter the main storyline mission earlier. The Galaxy Times analysis was not wrong. Everyone thought about it and came to a realization. That was indeed the case. If they were somewhere else, no one would have explained the situation in detail. Furthermore, Bennett had said that Sanctuary 3 was the only place that had the suppressant. This meant that this was the key location of the main storyline mission in version 2.0, and it was the mission left behind by Black Phantom that led them here. He's our guiding light. With the main storyline mission, the players were energized and asked what they could do to help. The situation was chaotic for a moment, and Bennett finally managed to stabilize the situation. He ordered his subordinates to list all kinds of tasks. These were all missions, and the content was different. However, the rewards were all to increase the progress of the main storyline mission. Each mission required a limited amount of manpower, and it caused a mad scramble. The big guilds got the most missions, and some solo players did not get the official mission of the Sanctuary, so they were a little depressed. A player could not help but ask, "Can we leave the Sanctuary now? I want to go somewhere else." Bennett had a helpless expression. "You'd better go up the wall and take a look yourself." The steel wall of the Sanctuary completely blocked the view outside. Hearing this, many players were curious. A group of players climbed up the wall and looked outside the sanctuary. With just one look, these players were stunned, and shock appeared on their faces. Within a radius of a few dozen kilometers around the shelter, countless tents were densely packed together, like gray clouds covering the reddish-brown earth. It was like a huge, open-air refugee camp. God knows how many people stayed outside the shelter and refused to leave. From time to time, angry shouts and fighting sounds could be heard from a certain location. It was unknown whether someone was having a seizure or fighting for scarce water or food. The news that we have the suppressant has spread. Countless people come here every day, wanting to be injected with the suppressant and seeking our protection. Bennett followed them and gazed at the endless refugee camp. His tone was sorrowful. However, our suppressant production is limited, and we can only inject a certain number of refugees every day. We can only let the others camp outside and wait. The more people there are, the more cases there will be. Many people die outside every day, but I can't let everyone in, or there will be a riot inside. I can only watch them die. The entire world was helpless against the mutation disaster, and only Sanctuary 3 had a solution. The result was obvious. This place had become the last hope in the eyes of the refugees, and countless people flocked to it. In Han Zhao's previous life, when the mutation disaster broke out, everyone had become headless flies, panicking and without a destination. The situation was extremely chaotic. But now, due to Han Zhao's influence on the storyline, all the refugees on the planet had a goal, and that was Sanctuary 3. They saw it as their only savior. However, the suppressant that Yi Yeching and Aurora had created could only be effective for a short period of time and would not be able to get rid of the virus forever. Bennett had no idea how to solve this disaster, and no one in Blue Star knew either. He could not help but think of the reason Han Zhao had left for the galaxy. Black Phantom wanted to find a solution to the disaster. Did this mean that staying in Blue Star would not be able to solve the mutation disaster? Bennett could only place his hopes on Han Zhao, if he could really return. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.